Chapter 235. What would happen if a person who hadn't eaten meat for tens of thousands of years suddenly started eating meat? Only now did Zhu Yao realize that 7 times in a night was just a legend. He did it once in a night, but once in a night, he did it for an entire night. Zhu Yao now knew what was called, "You won't die if you don't court death." The next day, she was already lying on the bed like a dead fish. There was not a single part of her body that was not sore. He didn't even have the strength to lift his legs. However, a certain culprit was full of vigor and vitality. He continued to take her pulse with a serious expression on his face. "It's just that my body is weak and my spirit is low. I'll be fine after resting for a while." "Master, before saying that, can you get off first? You know that I'm weak, so why are you still pressing on me?" Yu Yin was startled for a moment. A hint of undetectable redness flashed past his face. Turning his body, he pulled his disciple into his embrace. He coughed lightly and said, "Yu Yao, you fainted earlier." He took her pulse out of worry. It had been an entire night. How could she not faint? Who could plant radishes for an entire night? Yu Yin cast an art and tapped on the center of Zhu Yao's forehead. She instantly felt her body relaxing, and the fatigue on her body was completely swept away. Even the blue and purple marks on his body had disappeared. "Feeling better?" Zhu Yao vaguely responded. She was so tired that she could not even open her eyes. Yu Yin glanced at the person in his embrace. Recalling what happened last night, his face instantly flushed red. He hurriedly turned his head away and silently recited the clear heart chant. This was a very serious method of cultivation. He was taking a serious and responsible attitude towards his disciple. Last night, he was just a little stricter with his disciple. Just a little. He took a deep breath and tried to suppress the strange emotions in his heart, as well as the thought of waking up his disciple again. Silently circulating the spiritual energy in his body, he discovered that his cultivation was no different from the day before. Now that he thought about it, it seemed that the spell mentioned that during dual cultivation, one had to mobilize their spiritual energy, exchange their yin and yang, and unite their spirit and body to advance their cultivation. Last night, he seemed to have forgotten. "Yu Yin, why don't I wake my disciple up again and practice again?" On the 3rd day after Zhu Yao returned, she picked up a corpse of a dragon in the backyard. Although it had deliberately shrunk, it still covered most of the lawn. It laid on the ground with its white belly facing up, its limbs facing the sky, looking like it had nothing to live for. Hey, are you dead yet?" Zhu Yao stretched out her leg and gave it a kick. Little 7. The dragon pitifully turned its head back and swung its tail twice. "If you're not dead, then get out of my way." He felt that his dragon heart had been hurt. His figure flashed, and he turned back into the purple-clothed man. His face was no longer swollen, and he no longer looked like a pig's head. Instead, he looked like a color-matched version. "Xiaoqi, I'm of the same race as you. How can you do this to me?" "Who's from the same clan?" Zhu Yao rolled her eyes at him. "I'm a phoenix, and you're a dragon. We're not the same species, all right?" Furthermore, she was no longer a phoenix now either. His expression darkened, and he said in an aggrieved tone, "We're all of the divine race. We should help each other." It would have been fine if he did not mention this, but the moment he did, Zhu Yao's fury instantly surged. "Aojiang!" Zhu Yao gave him a kick. Ever since he turned into an azure dragon, she recognized that this person was that Aojiang who squashed her to death. "Help your sister, you piggish teammate. If I didn't help you, would I have been squashed to death by you?" This was simply the worst way to die in history, and there was no other. Wasn't I just too excited? It was an unintentional mistake, an unintentional mistake. He had an awkward look. "Furthermore, didn't I help you summon your soul? You're doing really well now as well. You're the one who helped me summon my soul." Zhu Yao was startled. She had thought that it was her master the entire time. "Of course it's me." Aojiang confidently patted on his chest. "Other than my god race, who else can directly summon living souls?" "Living souls?" What did he mean? Wasn't she a ghost? "Living souls are naturally souls that can be revived," Aojiang explained. "If it's just a normal soul summoning, Even if you return to this realm, you will merely be a ghost and cannot be revived. So that's the case. She was wondering why she was suddenly revived, but after pondering for a moment, she felt that something was amiss. Reviving from the dead wasn't something that could be achieved just by summoning one's soul, right? Let alone a living soul? Though the god race was strong, they did not have this kind of ability. Otherwise, the descendants of the god race wouldn't have such a hard time. How are you able to summon living souls? The moment her words fell, Ao Jiang's expression instantly darkened. As he looked at her with an accusatory look, "Isn't this all because I lent you my dragon pearl? You haven't returned it to me yet." Zhu Yao carefully sensed, and indeed, she realized that there was something extra in her primordial spirit. Why is it in my primordial spirit? How should I know? Ao Jiang looked like he wanted to cry. Back then, when I lent you my dragon pearl to eliminate the devil, we agreed that it wouldn't be difficult to borrow it again. However, you directly merged it into your primordial spirit. After I lost the dragon pearl, my strength was greatly reduced. Otherwise, when you were heavily injured back then, it wouldn't have been impossible for me to not save you. So she was the one who asked for it when she died back then. Back then, in order to draw out even more godly energy, she subconsciously wanted to merge her soul and soul together, which was why she placed the dragon pearl into her primordial spirit. It was no wonder when she was a ghost, she was able to freely use mystic arts. It seemed like it was because of the dragon pearl. If I hadn't lost the dragon pearl, how could I have been beaten to such a state by that master of yours? When he recalled this, Ao Jiang felt sorrow. To think that he, a dignified dragon, was actually beaten up by a human practitioner. This was simply too shameful. Little Seventh, are you sure you don't want to change to another man? Your master's too violent, and very perverted. Once a night, for an entire night, or something like that. Little Seventh, I'm speaking the truth. What do you think of me? Ao Jiang blinked at her and began to work hard to poach her. My body is strong, and my godly energy is strong as well. Living for several tens of thousands of years in a single breath isn't difficult at all, and I even know how to hatch eggs. Do you want? Boom. Before he could even finish, a bolt of heavenly lightning struck down, instantly turning him into charcoal. Yu Yin suddenly appeared at a place 5 meters away. His face was overflowing with a cold aura, and he slowly walked over. Every single step he took seemed to be able to form an ice source beneath his feet. Recalling the days when he was beaten into a pig's head a few days ago, Ao Jiang's legs instantly weakened as he knelt onto the ground. What are you doing? Zhu Yao took a step back. Ho ho. The corner of Ao Jiang's lips twitched, and he instantly said with a stern look, I feel that kneeling while looking at your master looks especially mighty. Earlier, who was the one who said he has a strong body, godly energy, and can hatch eggs? Yu Yin had already walked to Zhu Yao's side. Hearing his disciple's words, his eyes drifted towards Ao Jiang on the ground. Ao Jiang trembled, and cold sweat instantly poured down. Ho ho ho. Little Seventh, you heard wrong. I'm saying I'm stupid, ugly, and have nothing special about me. Can you be any more cowardly? Circulating her spiritual energy, she immediately forced out the dragon pearl from her primordial spirit and handed it over. I'm returning it to you. Ao Jiang was startled, and in an instant, his face was filled with emotions. He looked at Zhu Yao as though he was looking at an angel. Little Seventh, although you're stupid, ugly, and have nothing special about you, at the very least, your judgment is correct. Ao Jiang said that because of the dragon pearl, her soul was resurrected, so logically speaking, she should have been directly resurrected. However, she faintly felt that something was amiss, and the reason for the abnormality was because of her cultivation. Master, my cultivation seems to have fallen to the foundation stage. Earlier, because of the dragon pearl, she did not realize it. After returning it to Ao Jiang, she realized that her cultivation had returned to its original state. Yu Yin, however, had a calm look as he reached out his hand to comb the strands of hair beside her ears. Your cultivation was at the foundation stage in the first place. What did he mean? Zhu Yao was startled for a moment. She immediately materialized a water mirror, only to see a face that she had used for 20 years in the modern era. Why is this happening? Shouldn't she be resurrecting that tree demon avatar? Why did it turn out like this? Your previous body was damaged too severely. Even if your soul was resurrected, it's impossible for you to be resurrected. Yu Yin explained, that's why I had you return to your original body. Original body? Zhu Yao was dumbfounded as she fiercely widened her eyes. You're saying this is my original body? Yu Yin nodded. When your master first saw you, you already looked like this. It really was an original product brought from the modern era. Then, the corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. Master, can you tell me why my original body is here with you? Yu Yan's expression changed as he turned his eyes away and replied, back then, when you were killed by the fox demon, your master realized that your divine sense had yet to disappear. So, I had been preserving it. Preserving it? Her avatar. Master, tell me honestly, just how deep is your love for your disciple? Back then, he had thought that she would still wake up. Who would have known that she would walk on the path of no return? Later on, I realized, although your soul was no longer here, this body was automatically restoring itself, Yu Yin said with a stern look. Until that dragon summoned your soul, your master then decided to have your living soul directly attach itself to it. Zhu Yao touched her chest. It was completely flawless, and there wasn't even a single scar. The reason why her body could automatically restore itself should be because of the realm spirit, right? Could this be the return gift pack he mentioned back then? Recycling of trash? Speaking of summoning souls, Zhu Yao suddenly recalled the Ghost King in the underworld. That black miasma bug. Very clearly, that was the target of her mission this time. Although she did not know why there wasn't a storyline this time, the threat of that bug, she had personally witnessed it. Clenching her fists by her side, she took a deep breath. Master, I want to return to the underworld. Yu Yin stiffened for a moment. Turning to look at her, his brows deeply furrowed. A moment later, he said with a sunken voice, Yu Yao, your master isn't able to make it in time every single time. He wasn't able to make it in time to save you every single time. Zhu Yao felt a wave of guilt in the depths of her heart. Taking a step forward, she hugged onto his slightly cold body. After a moment of silence, she slowly said, Master, I saw Little Wimp. Who was Little Wimp? In Yu Yan's mind, there was only one person, someone else's disciple. And the creature he hated the most was someone else's disciple. And this creature was even the knot in his disciple's heart. This made him even more loathsome. Why did his disciple, whom he had painstakingly raised, have to save him without caring about the price? Even when she finally revived, she still had to go back to save him. Unhappy, he expressed his extreme unhappiness. He really wanted to return, pull Zmo out, and give him a scolding. He wanted to see just how he taught his disciple. Master, I'm not going back to die. Zhu Yao glanced at him with a helpless look. That naturally cooled air conditioner which had been emitting cold air for an entire day. If this continued, they would have to pass through winter in advance. The formation you two used to help me summon souls back then is still here. We can directly reverse that formation, and I can directly return. I don't have to die once. I'm going as well, Yu Yin solemnly said. Zhu Yao was startled. But wouldn't it be overloaded if she brought another one along? Yu Yin, however, did not reply. He immediately pulled Zhu Yao into the center of the formation and immediately activated the formation. In an instant, the formation shone with a bright red light, enveloping the two of them within. Tens of thousands of talismans danced in the surroundings. A moment later, they stopped and began to move in the opposite direction. And that red light slowly turned into a white light as well. The scenery in front of them changed, and they arrived at another world. A silvery white river appeared in front of them. They're back. Zhu Yao was a little dumbfounded. Initially, she had thought that reversing that soul-summoning formation would not take a long time, yet her master completed it in an instant. Where? Yu Yin asked. That other person's disciple. Even though his tone was clearly the same as usual, Zhu Yao faintly sensed a hint of anger within it. The river of forgetfulness was completely silent, and not even a single ghost could be seen. However, there were still a few traces of battle left at the scene. Zhu Yao reckoned that little Wimp should have already returned to spiritual realm. That Ghost King had already been sealed and would not be able to come out for a while. Looking around, she saw that on the riverbank, there were a few strands of black miasma faintly drifting about. After taking a closer look, she saw a string of bug letters, which should have been left behind by that Ghost King. Zhu Yao wanted to approach closer to study it. However, she was pulled back by Yu Yin, who was behind her. "Don't move." Yu Yan's expression sank. Frowning, he looked at the drifting miasma with a cautious look. "If I'm not wrong, that's resentment." Resentment? Zhu Yao was startled for a moment. She had often heard of this term. Usually, only ghosts with resentment could maintain their spiritual consciousness when they were alive. She had always thought that the so-called resentment referred to a kind of obsession of a person and was merely a noun. She had never thought that it would actually have a physical body as well. Resentment is born from a person's hatred, unwillingness, vengeance, and various other emotions. Yu Yin explained, "It's formless and shapeless, yet it cannot be created or destroyed. The moment one is tainted by it, they will be controlled by various emotions, and they will never be able to transcend." Zhu Yao was startled. "There's no way to remove it?" Yu Yin shook his head. "I have only seen such descriptions in certain ancient records and legends in the past, but this is my first time seeing a physical body. If I had not seen it peacefully floating above the river of forgetfulness, I wouldn't have been able to recognize it either. The water of the river of forgetfulness could even wash away all of the imprints a ghost had when they were alive, yet this black miasma was completely unaffected. Thinking about it, it could only be resentment." Zhu Yao was a little troubled. From the sounds of it, this resentment seemed to be the amalgamation of all negative emotions. Even the water of the river of forgetfulness was useless, and lightning could only disperse it in an instant. This resentment was heaven-defying, wasn't it? Chapter 236. Zhu Yao returned and asked Ghost Officer Ning Yun about it. As expected, Little Wimp had returned to spiritual realm, and naturally, he brought that sealed Ghost King with him. She couldn't help but worry. If the bugs she saw were really formed by resentment, then she didn't know how long the soul summoning seal would last. He had to meet up with Little Wimp as soon as possible. But where is that damned spiritual realm? She only knew that she could enter the spiritual realm after having a physical body, but who the hell knew how to get there? She was a human now, so it was still unknown whether she could go or not. Ning Yun, who was at the side, was stunned. He pointed upwards. "The spiritual realm is naturally in the sky." The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. Raising her head, she looked at the aurora in the sky. "You said it's in the sky. You can't be referring to above, right?" "Yes." Ning Yun nodded his head affirmatively. "Wasn't this a little too casual? They were two different worlds after all. Aren't you embarrassed to be so close to me?" No wonder Little Wimp didn't even leave a word for her before returning to the spiritual realm. So the spiritual realm was right next door. Yu Yin frowned. What that ghost servant said was not false. Earlier, when he released his divine sense, he indeed felt that there was a thin layer of barrier in the sky. Thus, he directly hugged his disciple and flew up into the sky. "Master?" They stopped in midair. Zhu Yao raised her head to look at the vast and boundless sky in front of her, and was a little puzzled as to why they stopped. "This is it." Yu Yin indicated that the boundary between the two realms was right above their heads. Zhu Yao curiously reached out her hand, only to see the vast sky earlier. As though it was a water surface, ripples began to spread out in all directions. Her fingertips also felt a chill. Is this water? Why was there water in the sky, and it was hanging upside down? Most likely, if we pass through it, we'll be able to reach the so-called spiritual realm, Yu Yin said with a stern expression. Zhu Yao. At the very least, it was a world-crossing door. Why was it hanging in the sky so casually? Somehow, he felt that he was unreliable. Enter, Yu Yin said. But, don't be afraid. Yu Yin reached out his hand to stroke her head. Your master is here. All right. As a precaution, Yu Yin added a layer of defensive barrier around the two of them, and then he immediately flew upwards. Zhu Yao simply felt as though something had flashed past her surroundings, and as though her body was being pulled by something, she unconsciously flew forward. In the surroundings, there were streaks of things that looked like flowing lights, and they were currently rapidly flying backwards. In the blink of an eye, the scenery in front of her changed, and the spiritual energy in the surroundings suddenly grew denser as well, causing her entire body to feel comfortable. Above their heads, a large piece of green land appeared, filled with lush greenery. There were also all kinds of upside-down immortal mountains floating in the air. Before Zhu Yao could even figure out why the mountain was upside down, she suddenly felt her head turning heavy and her legs turning light as she charged straight towards the green patch of land. No, he fell. The mountain didn't fall, but she did. Master! Zhu Yao panicked as she shouted out loudly. Out of habit, he wanted to fly on his sword, but he suddenly remembered that he didn't have a means of transportation at all. He wanted to use wind elemental spells, but it was too late. With a splash, he plunged headfirst into a pool of mud, and his face landed on the ground. A certain master who was one step behind. No matter what, he couldn't stop his disciples' death-seeking footsteps. What should he do? Yu Yin sighed. Casting an art with his hands, he materialized a strand of divine energy and instantly pulled his disciple who was covered in mud out. Fortunately, he had cast a defensive art on her beforehand, which was why she wasn't injured at all. Other than being a little dirty. Zhu Yao spat out a mouthful of black mud. Pwah, master, can you not screw your disciple over? What happened to the promise of having you around? You liar. Yu Yin cast a dirt removal art on her with a calm look, instantly reverting back to a clean and foolish disciple. He then said with a stern and serious tone, Don't stray too far away from me. It was clearly your teleportation that was delayed, all right? Looking at her messy hair, Yu Yin frowned and could not help but pull down her hairband. Come and sit down. Taking a few steps back, a wooden comb suddenly appeared in his hands. He waved it at her, looking as though he wanted to tidy her hair. Why the hell would Master carry a comb with him? Aren't you bringing along a little too complete a set of life tools? As a little expert in life, his skills were indeed excellent. Her hair that was still like a chicken's nest earlier, under her master's skillful hands, was tied into a bun in just a moment. Zhu Yao shook it. It was rather sturdy. Yu Yin sized her up for a moment, and as though he was finally satisfied, he slowly said, Done. Zhu Yao stood up and raised her head to look. Above her head was a familiar blue sky, and there was nothing strange about it. However, on the other side of the sky was the underworld. Master, what do you think is going on with this spiritual realm? Theoretically speaking, the separation between the 3,000 worlds was extremely clear, and it was very difficult to break through them. For example, when one wanted to head to the divine realm from the mortal realm, one had to experience countless tribulations, and only then would one be able to reach the divine realm through the light of guidance. And back then, with her identity as a black tortoise of the god race, she had exhausted the godly energy of an entire realm and paid the price of her life before she could forcefully open the world-crossing door. And this crossing between the spiritual realm and the underworld was excessively simple. Other than a slight delay, it was basically like a vacation, where one would arrive in a single train ride. Your master doesn't know either. Yu Yin sighed. Most likely, the connection between this world and the underworld is extremely tight, and they are probably one entity in the first place. Same entity? But clearly, the two worlds were completely different. However, Yu Yan's tone changed. The spiritual energy in this place is extremely dense, and it is scattered in all directions. There's no difference in strength. On the contrary, the underworld did not have the slightest bit of spiritual energy. Dense spiritual energy. Did that mean that one's cultivation level would be fast as well? She wondered what cultivation level Little Wimp was at. She had forgotten to ask him about it earlier as well. Although they had already arrived at the spiritual realm, it really wasn't easy to find someone in this world. After discussing for a moment, The two of them decided to first head to the nearest practitioner's market to scout for information. Although the grassland they were in was huge, fortunately, there was a practitioner's market several dozen kilometers away. Yu Yin simply released his divine sense and scanned the area, and found the specific location. Bringing his disciple along, he immediately flew over. That market was not big, and it was different from the practitioner's markets Zhu Yao had seen in the past. There were actually no concealment formations set up here, as though they were not worried about mortals accidentally entering. The market, however, was very lively. Practitioners were flying about everywhere, and they even brought along various spiritual beasts. Zhu Yao felt that it was a little strange, though it was very common for practitioners to rear spiritual beasts. Although it was very common for practitioners to raise spiritual beasts, it was rare for them to bring them along so openly. After all, most demonic beasts did not have any intelligence, and they were afraid of causing unnecessary conflicts. However, it seemed like the people here had already gotten used to such matters, and most of them turned a blind eye to the spiritual beasts around practitioners. And most of the demonic beasts were obediently staying by their master's side, and there didn't seem to be any conflicts happening. Most of the practitioners on the streets were selling demonic beast eggs that had yet to recognize their masters. It seemed like demonic beasts were very popular in the spiritual realm. Zhu Yao went around to scout for information about Little Wimp. Strangely, when she mentioned the three words Wang Shuji, those practitioners looked at her with very strange expressions. She faintly felt that something was amiss, but after continuously asking a few people, she still did not get any results. Are you certain that the person you're looking for is surnamed Wang, and his name is Shuji? A practitioner selling talismans repeatedly confirmed. Yes, have you seen him before? Zhu Yao's eyes shone. He sized her up for a moment and carried a hint of probing. You can't be talking about that person from Ancient Azure Sect, right? Ancient Azure Sect? Little Wimp Sect in spiritual realm? I'm not sure about that. May I know? Who is he to you? That practitioner asked. My son. Just as she was about to say son, after pondering for a moment, she changed her words. He's my little brother. When that practitioner heard this, he suddenly flared up. Waving his hands at her in disdain, he said, Shoo shoo shoo, a mere foundation stage girl dares to make fun of this old man. Go away, don't affect my business. Why did he change his attitude so quickly? Zhu Yao curled her lips and had no choice but to turn around and leave. However, she did obtain some useful information. No matter what, she should first head to that Ancient Azure Sect to take a look. Ancient Azure Sect sure was easy to find out. After casually asking a person, she managed to find out its general location. She did not waste any more time and immediately met up with her master. Then, she told him about the strange incident earlier. She faintly felt a little worried. Could that little wimp Wang Shuji have offended someone in spiritual realm? And I am unable to see through those practitioners' cultivation levels. They are most likely at foundation and above. She was getting more and more worried for Little Wimp. No. Yu Yin suddenly refuted. What do you mean no? He shook his head and said seriously. Yu Yao, the cultivation levels of the group of practitioners in the market are all at nascent soul and above. Zhu Yao instantly widened her eyes. She couldn't have misheard, right? Nascent soul? The hell, which nascent soul practitioner would sell talisman papers and spiritual beasts in a street stall? Her values received an unprecedented impact. The spiritual energy in this place is so dense, it's normal for one to advance quickly. That's a little too fast, isn't it? Also, Yu Yin continued, I sensed a practitioner at the demigod stage and above in the market. Above demigod stage? Zhu Yao was stunned. An earth deity? I don't think so. Yu Yin frowned. Without a divine body, his strength shouldn't be able to match an earth deity. But he is indeed above demigod stage. Then why hasn't he ascended yet? Wasn't it said that one would ascend after a demigod stage practitioner? This is also something your master doesn't understand. Logically speaking, that was indeed the case. However, after inspecting with his divine sense, that person indeed did not have any signs of facing tribulation. In other words, The light of guidance could not descend upon his divine body. It seems that the heavenly Tao allows this world to have existences with cultivation levels higher than demigod stage. The heavenly Tao was a little too casual, right? It was one thing for bugs to be heaven-defying, but was there a need for humanoid NPCs to be this heaven-defying as well? In this world where demigods could be found everywhere, and nascent soul practitioners were as plentiful as dogs, what was a foundation practitioner like her supposed to do? Was it too late to regret now? After finding out that the laws of this world were especially lenient towards practitioners' cultivation levels, her master said that he wanted to remove the restriction on his own cultivation level. Zhu Yao naturally agreed with both hands raised. He was a high deity in the first place, but in order to prevent himself from attracting the light of guidance, he suppressed his cultivation level to a demigod stage. Evidently, this world was extremely lenient towards the upper limit of cultivation levels. Hence, he no longer had any worries. The higher the level of her teammates, the higher Zhu Yao's chances of defeating monsters. They found a quiet place and placed down a few formations. Zhu Yao then sat at the side, watching her master remove the restriction bit by bit. In order to prevent himself from removing the restriction too much and directly ascending, Yen raised his cultivation level step by step. First, he directly reached the profound deity, gold deity, and then heavy deity. He stopped and explained, I can faintly sense that the heavenly Tao is loosening. I'm afraid that if I continue raising my cultivation level, I will trigger the ascension lightning tribulation. It seemed like the limit of this world was the cultivation level of a heavy deity. Let's go to ancient Azure sect. Yu Yen stood up. All right. Zhu Yao nodded and walked over. She sized up her master whose aura was becoming purer. With a wave of his hand, he summoned his own divine sword. When he turned around, his ink-like hair brushed past the side of Zhu Yao's face, and a strange feeling flashed in the depths of her heart. Master, why do I feel that you're a little shorter? Yu Yen turned to look at her, and then reached out his hand to stroke her head. Don't mess around. Was she imagining things? But her master was a head taller than her, and his hair clearly couldn't touch her. Yu Yen immediately flew on his sword and headed in the direction of ancient Azure sect. Zhu Yao, however, felt that something was amiss. The sky was slowly beginning to darken, and the sun was setting in the west. The speed of Yu Yan's flying sword suddenly slowed down, and the tall figure in front of him began to shrink at a speed visible to the naked eye. Master! Zhu Yao was startled as she pulled the person in front of her. However, his figure shook, and like a balloon that was suddenly punctured, he swayed about, rising and falling. Master, what's wrong? Don't scare me. The sword swayed for a moment, and then it could no longer be controlled and fell down. She had no choice but to take over the sword midway, and only then did she barely manage to land on the ground. She anxiously hugged onto it, and in her hands, a half-grown child. This is a master? This doesn't make sense. Why did he suddenly turn into a child, hey? Master, master! Zhu Yao's heart tightened as she worriedly called out a few times. What responded to her was a light and slow snoring sound. Zhu Yao. She held onto his pulse and checked it. His pulse was calm, and his breathing was steady. Other than becoming smaller, there were no other abnormalities in his body. He was simply asleep. Straight face hashtag Zhu Yao's expression darkened. Could this be the aftereffect of removing the suppression on his cultivation? It seemed like she wouldn't be able to wake him up anytime soon. Right now, she had no choice but to head to ancient Azure sect first. Heaving a deep sigh, she resigned to her fate and carried the miniature version of her master. Just as she was about to continue forward, suddenly, with a roar, a black figure scuttled out from the forest. A gigantic demonic beast suddenly blocked her path. Zhu Yao's heart tightened, and for a moment, she wanted to curse out. Did it have to be such a coincidence? She was currently just a foundation trash. Wait a minute. Calm down. It seemed like ever since she became a dragon, a large majority of demonic beasts had a friendship that surpassed their own species. Perhaps this one was the same as well? Zhu Yao's heart loosened as she seriously stared at this demonic beast. We're friends, right? Right. That demonic beast walked over one step at a time, and then, with a single gulp, it swallowed both master and disciple. Chapter 237. Zhu Yao met with a demonic beast, and then she was eaten. Although she was currently just a foundation trash, after cultivating for so many years, her basic conditioned reflexes were still present. Hence, she immediately cast a protective barrier on herself. Raising her hand, she was about to cast an ice-type mystic art in retaliation. That demonic beast suddenly loosened its mouth and curiously looked at her with widened eyes. It even blinked a few times. Then, it moved closer and sniffed. In an instant, as though it was frightened, it fiercely jumped a step back. Looking at her again, it then widened its mouth. Ugh, it began to vomit. Just how disgusting was she? Was there a need to vomit to this extent? Hey, hey, hey! Zhu Yao shouted out with a darkened expression. That demonic beast was shocked. The fur on its body stood up like a hedgehog, as though it wanted to retreat. However, it did not manage to step properly, causing its feet to slip, and it almost fell. Flustered, it jumped a few meters away. Yo, it's rather timid. It seemed like it was a beast cub. In an instant, the nervousness in the depths of her heart was completely swept away. Recalling that she seemed to be able to understand demonic beasts' words earlier, she wondered if this ability was still there. She took a step forward. Little beastie, do you know where ancient Azure sect is? That demonic beast did not reply, and simply stared at her anxiously. Then, it moved its claws and decisively took a step back. Was she really that scary? Is ancient Azure sect nearby? She took another step forward. The demonic beast moved 2 steps back. How big is this forest? She took another step forward. It then took another 3 steps back. Is there a need for you to be so afraid of me? Another 4 steps back. Stop retreating. 5 steps. There's a splat. A miserable cry pierced through the sky. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched as she finished her unfinished words. A pit. Where's your intelligence as a demonic beast? Sighing, Zhu Yao immediately walked over. That pit was very deep, and there were even ripples of formations in the surroundings. It should be a trap specially dug by a practitioner to capture demonic beasts. That demonic beast with a low intelligence was currently struggling inside. From the initial panic, it turned into furious roars. In one moment, it was desperately clawing at the wall, and in the next moment, it was forcefully charging at the surrounding array formation. However, it was no use. It couldn't get out of the pit at all. Instead, its claws were rebounded by the array formation, and many wounds were left on it. Next time, it would be tormented to death by him. Hey! Zhu Yao could not help but cry out. The demonic beast was stunned and raised its head abruptly. When it saw that it was her, it immediately quietened down as if someone had pressed the pause button. With a shake of his body, he stopped digging at the wall and stopped ramming into the formation. It started to shrink towards the wall weakly, as if it wanted to hide itself. However, it rubbed against the wall, causing dirt to fall down. In the end, it found that it had nowhere to hide. Because it had curled itself into a ball of fur, it began to let out a low whine, and its huge body trembled. Is it crying? Oh, whoa. Oh, woo. Its voice was getting louder and louder, and its big black eyes were dripping with water, wetting its beautiful white fur. Don't cry. Oh. What are you crying for? I was the one who was almost eaten, wasn't I? Oh. Furthermore, you fell down yourself, didn't you? Oh. Its cries grew even sadder, and in the end, it actually began to roll around at the bottom of the hole. Yo, it's even panting now. Zhu Yao's expression darkened. Forget it, it's just a beast. Casting a wind-type mystic art, she swept up a piece of withered wood at the side and dragged it into the hole. Coincidentally, it pressed down on the formation core at the bottom of the hole. A white light flashed, and the formation instantly lost its effects. Stop whining. Come up. That fur ball was stunned for a moment. A moment later, it tilted its head to look at the withered wood that was used to build a bridge, and then looked at the formation that had lost its effects. Its eyes widened, and it happily jumped up. Its front paws stepped on the withered wood, and with 2 thuds, it climbed up. It happily flopped around on the ground a few times. Raising its head, it glanced at her, and then it ran into the depths of the forest, disappearing in an instant. Well, this ungrateful little bastard. It seemed like she shouldn't count on it to lead the way either. Raising her head to look at the night sky, Zhu Yao had no choice but to carry her miniature master and head into the depths of the forest. Looking at the location of the market, Ancient Azure Sect shouldn't be far away. Walking in the forest was different from flying on a sword. There were too many references in the surroundings, and it was very easy to lose one's sense of direction. She did want to fly, but unfortunately, she did not have any transportation tools. However, as long as it was a deity sect, they should be above spiritual veins. Walking towards a place with dense spiritual energy was always the right choice. After walking for about 2 hours, she finally saw a place that looked like a mountain gate. On a gigantic stone wall, the 2 large words Ancient Azure were written. Next to the stone wall was a vast ocean. Zhu Yao heaved a sigh of relief and immediately walked towards the ocean. Just as she passed through the stone wall, the scenery in front of her distorted. The ocean suddenly disappeared, transforming into a blessed land of celestial mountains. Gigantic mountain peaks floated in midair, and the entire place was filled with dazzling lights, and auspicious clouds filled the sky. I wonder why this fellow Taoist has come to my Ancient Azure Sect? A male voice sounded from the left. A man in a light robe walked out from the teleportation formation. His face was filled with a courteous smile. Zhu Yao guessed that he should be the sect's guardian disciple. However, she was still unable to see through his cultivation level. It seemed like he was above her as well. Fellow Taoist. Because she was carrying him, she could only politely nod. This humble one is Zhu Yao. I have come to your esteemed sect to look for an old friend. That man still politely said. I wonder who fellow Taoist is looking for? His surname is Wang, and his name is Shuji. I wonder if he can enter the sect now? The man was startled, and a strange expression flashed past his face. Sizing her up for a moment, his brows furrowed. His expression no longer had the courteousness from before, and carrying a hint of anger, he said, I have seen many ladies like you. It's useless, go back. If you want to sneak into my Ancient Azure Sect, you have to see if your aptitude is sufficient. What did he mean? However, he impatiently waved his hands. Hurry, hurry, and leave. Fellow Taoist, I don't wish to enter Ancient Azure. Scram, scram, scram. He waved his hands with an impatient look. If you don't leave now, don't blame me for being impolite. As he said that, he really reached out his hand and pushed her out. Just as Zhu Yao was about to explain, a furious roar suddenly sounded from behind her. A white figure darted out with a swoosh. In an instant, it smashed that guardian disciple onto the ground with a single claw, and then fiercely bared its fangs at him. It was that cowardly demonic beast earlier. Why was it here? Heavenly Sovereign by Yuan. That disciple suddenly exclaimed. Looking at the ferocious beast, he then turned to look at Zhu Yao. In an instant, with a look of realization, he hurriedly crawled up and bowed towards that demonic beast. This disciple's eyes are bad. I did not realize that this is the Heavenly Sovereign's esteemed guest. Heavenly Sovereign, please forgive me. That demonic beast puffed out a mouthful of air at him, as though it was extremely angry. It then turned its head and no longer looked at him, yet the disciple continued to apologize. What was going on? Could it be that this stupid beast was raised by Ancient Azure Sect? And it seemed like its position was rather high, to the point that even human practitioner disciples did not dare to offend it? Zhu Yao seemed to be sizing up this beast. That beast trembled from her gaze. Earlier, it was extremely domineering when it was bullying others, but the moment she looked at it, it immediately cowered. It timidly glanced at her, and as though it was frightened, with a swoosh, it once again disappeared without a trace. Zhu Yao, just how afraid of her was it? This esteemed guest, I did not know of your esteemed identity earlier and have offended you greatly. I hope you will forgive me. The disciple changed his previous anger and passionately welcomed her. Esteemed guest, please follow me to the main mountain. Zhu Yao nodded. Following him, she walked towards a teleportation formation. The formation light flashed, and she had already arrived in front of a towering great hall. Where's Wang Shuji? She thought that he would directly bring her to Little Wimp's place. Yet, unexpectedly, the guardian disciple politely invited her into the hall to have a seat. That disciple explained, "Unfortunately, our sect master is currently in closed-door training, and it isn't convenient for him to receive you. Currently, the matters in the sect are temporarily managed by the Grand Elder. Esteemed guest, please wait a moment. This lowly one will inform the elder to come over." After saying that, he retreated out of the hall. Most likely, he had gone to inform that elder. Zhu Yao pondered for a moment. If Wang Shuji was really a disciple of ancient Azure sect, then if she was looking for someone, it was still necessary for her to inform the manager. Hence, she could only wait with peace of mind. Her master had yet to wake up, and it wasn't good for her to carry him the entire time either. Hence, she pulled 2 chairs together and placed him on the chair, allowing him to lie down more comfortably. Only then did she begin to size up this great hall. The more she looked at it, the more familiar it felt. No matter if it was the shape of the chair, the style of the table, the curtains hanging in the hall, or even the person who entered through the door, Junior Marshal Nephew ZMO. Zhu Yao exclaimed. When her words fell, the person who had just stepped into the hall staggered and almost fell to the ground. Little Marshal Uncle. ZMO suddenly widened his eyes. You're still alive. No, wait, you're already dead? Why did these words sound a little strange? Why are you here? His face was filled with disbelief. Not just me. My master is here as well. She pointed to the person who had fallen asleep on the chair. What? Ancestral Marshal Uncle is dead as well? Was there a need to curse him to death the moment she saw his face? Zhu Yao really did not expect that she would once again meet a familiar face. And he was even the former sect master of Ancient Hill Sect, ZMO. After he perished, he went to the netherworld, awakened his intelligence, and became a spirit. Only then did he come to the spirit world. After that, he joined this ancient Azure sect, cultivated step by step, and finally became the sect master. It was only 100 years ago that he handed over the responsibility to his disciple and retired to the second line. And his disciple was none other than Little Wimp Wang. Wang Shuji was currently the sect master of Ancient Azure Sect. It was no wonder that when she asked for his name, the others would look at her with that kind of expression. So he was actually a sect leader. They probably thought that she was trying to suck up to him. Where's Little Wimp? Zhu Yao asked. Zemo's expression sank, and a moment later, he said, the last time he returned from the underworld, he suffered a heavy injury for some unknown reason. Currently, he's in closed-door training to recuperate. He's injured? Zhu Yao's heart clenched, but she quickly recalled, that's not right. The injuries he suffered last time weren't serious, so why does he need to go into seclusion? Little Marshal Uncle, do you know how he got hurt? Zhu Yao told him about the matters in the underworld, and even mentioned about resentment. But back then, when he returned, his injuries were indeed serious. ZMO said with a heavy expression, many parts of his meridians were damaged. I have tried to treat his injuries many times, but it was completely ineffective. It's basically impossible to repair. How is that possible? Her meridians had been shattered into smithereens several times, yet she was still able to restore them. Could it be that only her meridians could be used in a cycle, while Little Wimp's meridians could only be used once? Wait a minute, of course. The one who injured Little Wimp seemed to be that Ghost King. No wonder. Where did Little Wimp place the talisman that sealed the Ghost King? Talisman? ZMO was startled, and his face was filled with confusion. What talisman? The hell? As expected, he had yet to deal with it. She grabbed onto his collar. Bring me to see him. Immediately. ZMO could tell that this matter wasn't simple as well. Without any hesitation, he turned around and brought her out of the hall. Suddenly, the ground shook, and shrill ghostly cries resounded. At the front right of the mountain, a black aura rose into the sky, breaking through the skies. That black aura slowly condensed, and a moment later, it condensed into a gigantic, struggling human figure. Shuji. Zmo was startled. Summoning his flying sword, he flew towards the direction of that black aura. The hell? Wait for me. She didn't have a transportation tool, hey? Just as she was about to chase after him, her waist suddenly felt something, and when she turned around, she bumped into a cold embrace. Master, you're awake. Even his height had grown back. Emin, Yu Yin responded. Hugging his disciple, he flew towards Zmo's direction. His figure flashed, and he had already arrived at the entrance of a cave residence. That place was right below that ghost king in the sky. A little black aura floated within the residence as well. Compared to the ones in the sky, it was a little fainter, but the word bug could still be clearly seen. This was the resentment left behind by that ghost king. Zhu Yao walked in, and the person sitting in the house was precisely Little Wimp. He seemed to have suffered extremely heavy injuries as he puked out a mouthful of blood. His body was even shrouded by a black aura. His face was pale to the point where not a single hint of blood could be seen. Zmo was currently sitting behind him, borrowing him to treat his injuries. However, it did not seem to be of much use. Little Wimp. Zhu Yao's heart clenched. Why did things turn out like this? Wang Shuji weakly raised his head. Seeing that it was her, his eyes shone, and with a smile he said, Big sis Zhu Yao, it's good that you're all right. The one who's not all right is you. Just what happened? He did not reply, as though he no longer had much strength left. Though, Yu Yin took a step forward, pulled his hand, and checked his pulse. With a cold voice, he said, Resentment has entered his body. What? Zhu Yao was startled. The terrifying cries outside grew even louder. Yu Yin frowned and instructed. Yu Yao, seal it. Zhu Yao's eyes shone. Yu Yan's figure had already flashed, flying towards that ghost king filled with resentment in the sky. Little martial ant? Zmo was confused. What's ancestral grand uncle trying to do? Leave it to me. Zhu Yao did not answer him directly, and immediately sat cross-legged behind Wang Shuji's back. The injuries on Little Wimp's body had yet to fully heal, and it should be because of resentment. There was basically no way to eliminate resentment, and if this continued, Little Wimp's injuries would only worsen, and the small injuries would turn into heavy injuries. Resentment was actually the amalgamation of all negative emotions, and was rather similar to devilic energy. Hence, her master reminded her that she could try sealing arts. Zhu Yao took a deep breath, and immediately sensed the location of the resentment in Little Wimp's body. Circulating her spiritual energy, she gathered all of the resentment in one spot, and then activated the sealing arts. In an instant, golden characters flashed, and then they entered Wang Shuji's body, firmly locking down those few clouds of black aura. Chapter 238. Zhu Yao heaved a sigh of relief. She immediately circulated her spiritual energy to repair the meridians on Little Wimp's body. He was not heavily injured in the first place, and without the influence of resentment, he recovered very quickly. And the black miasma that had been surrounding him had gathered above the seal on his abdomen as well. It slowly condensed into a shape, and in the end, it turned into the three letters, bug. Zhu Yao's hands trembled, and she almost channeled her energy. This wasn't a divine art. Why did Little Wimp turn into a bug? What kind of imprint is this? Zmo stared at the imprint floating in front of Wang Shuji and asked confusedly. Zhu Yao was startled. You can see it? Zmo nodded. The mystic art Little Martial Uncle cast is indeed unique. I have never seen a formation imprint like this before. I wonder what kind of rune it is. This isn't a rune. Zhu Yao's heart was a little chaotic. She faintly guessed that this bug was different from before. After carefully inspecting Little Wimp while he was unconscious, she immediately began to remove his clothes. Little Martial Uncle, what are you doing? Zmo's face was filled with fear. I'm seeing if there's a similar imprint on his body. Zmo's expression darkened even more. Then there's no need to remove his pants, right? Zhu Yao's hands paused, and she let go of his underpants. The hell? I'm used to it. She carefully looked at the shirtless little wimp, and as expected, there were 3 letters, bug below his chest as well. Hey, old man, then can you see this? Naturally. ZMO nodded. Earlier, little Marshall uncle sealed something, so it was normal for Shuji to have a rune on his body. As expected, Zhu Yao heaved a sigh of relief. ZMO could see it as well, which meant that this bug was not a bug that only she could see in the past. The reason why little wimp had this word on his body was because of the resentment in his body. The real bug was resentment, and not little wimp. Wang Shuji had already slowly opened his eyes, and his face was a little redder. Big sis Zhu Yao? Little wimp, how are you? Zhu Yao stepped forward to support him. He smiled. I'm much better, He paused halfway through his words. Looking down at himself, who was only left with a pair of underpants, he instantly stiffened. His entire body flushed red like a shrimp, and even his voice began to tremble. Zhu, 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 Zhu. Big sis, I said I didn't do anything. Zhu Yao took a step back, raised her hand, and swore. ZMO cast a scornful look at her, and silently looked at her right hand, which was still holding onto a man's robe. I can explain that. Zhu Yao threw it back to him. This was really just a mistake, hey? Let me explain. Puff. Wang Shuji suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. It couldn't be. He was so angry that he vomited blood. Trust me, I'm not a pervert. Shuji. ZMO frowned. Taking a step forward, he held onto Wang Shuji's wrist, and he did not forget to glare at her. Wang Shuji's face was completely red. Ignoring the fact that she was still vomiting blood, she hurriedly wrapped her clothes around herself. Zhu Yao. Why did she feel like she was a scumbag? This doesn't seem right. ZMO carefully looked for a moment, and the more he looked, the stranger his expression became. His face alternated between green and purple, and in the end, it turned completely pale. As though he had understood something terrifying, his entire body stiffened. Zhu Yao's heart clenched. Old man, just what's wrong with him? Logically speaking, she had been treating him very diligently, so little wimp should be fine. The corner of ZMO's face twitched, and he stiffly replied. His pulses flowing smoothly, like a pearl rolling on a plate. What do you mean? Can you speak human language? This is. His face was about to twist into a ball, and he said with emphasis on every single word. The pulse of pregnancy. Hiss. The robe in Wang Shuji's hands was instantly torn into 2. The place instantly turned silent. ZMO raised his head, and with a pleading look. Little Marshall aunt this. I didn't do it. Zhu Yao reflexively said. ZMO. Wang Shuji. I'm saying, I didn't have the time to do anything. Aphui. The child really isn't mine. ZMO. Wang Shuji. That's not right. I won't take responsibility. Ugh. The hell? It's getting more and more confusing, hey? What do you need to take responsibility for? A cold male voice resounded. A certain person who had just finished killing monsters suddenly appeared at the door. Master Kojima. Listen to my explanation. Wang Shuji was pregnant. The child wasn't hers. The child wasn't hers. The child wasn't hers. Important things had to be said 3 times. In the beginning, she had rejected such a setting that destroyed her worldview. However, after the consultation between ZMO, her master, and herself, the fact that Wang Shuji was going to be was confirmed. Then, the question was, where did daddy go? Aphui. Just how did the child come about? After the consultation of the 3 experts, they carefully researched and discussed. The pulse of pregnancy on little Wimp's body was due to resentment. Back then, when he was sealed, resentment was concentrated and accumulated at his abdomen and was sealed near his dantian. The pulse of pregnancy on little Wimp's body was actually the fluctuation of resentment. In order to disperse the resentment in his body, the seal had to be removed. However, once the seal was removed, if the resentment could not be instantly dispersed, the resentment would spread to his entire body. Although little Wimp's injuries were mostly healed, he did not have the lightning spirit vein, and basically could not disperse the resentment. If her master were to do it, his body would not be able to withstand the lightning pressure. They could only wait until his injuries were completely healed. The conclusion was, leave it be for now. However, 2 days later, Wang Shuji's recovery was getting better and better, but his stomach suddenly grew bigger and already looked like a normal pregnant woman of 4 to 5 months. A fine artistic young man suddenly had a beer belly. The pitiful master, Zmo, immediately invited Yu Yin and Zhu Yao over for a consultation. Yu Yin seriously felt his pulse. Zhu Yao stared straight at little Wimp's stomach and could not help but touch it. Strangely, there really was movement inside. Warrior, you're about to give birth. Big sis Zhu Yao. Wang Shuji's expression darkened, and he glared at her with resentment. Yu Yan's eyes swept past his own disciple's unruly paw and frowned. He released his hand that was feeling his pulse and conveniently pulled his disciple's paw back. How is it? Zhu Yao immediately diverted her attention and asked, male? Female? Everyone. The resentment is merely trying to break through the seal. Yu Yin coldly said, no need to worry. The more it tries to break through, the easier it will be to disperse in the future. It seemed like the pregnancy symptom was a good sign. Zhu Yao and Zmo heaved a sigh of relief. Thank you, Ancestral Grandmaster, Zmo said with a smile. Yu Yin, however, did not reply. He tightened his grip on his disciple's paw and immediately pulled her out of the door, as though he did not want to stay for even a moment longer. Zhu Yao had no choice but to turn around as she walked and waved at Little Wimp. Little Wimp, take good care of your injuries. I will come visit you and the child tomorrow. Why do these words sound weird? Yu Yin directly sealed that Ghost King on a floating mountain in an ancient Azure sect and placed down layers of formations on it. Unless the entire mountain was destroyed, the Ghost King would basically not be able to come out. Zhu Yao naturally did not have any objections. In the first place, the main reason why she came to Spiritual Realm was for this Ghost King. Her master's formation arts far surpassed hers, so if he were to make a move, it would naturally be fine. Just in case, she and her master simply stayed on the mountain. Firstly, to observe, and secondly, to disperse the resentment after Wang Shuji recovers. Secondly, within a month, you have to form your Azoth core. Yu Yin said with a stern look. Zhu Yao looked like she wanted to cry. Great King, please let me go. Every time she resurrected, she had to start cultivating from the very beginning. Though she was a good student who excelled in both morals and studies, she had only taken the college entrance exam once. I will now begin my closed-door training. Master. Kajima. Yu Yao. Yu Yin stroked her head. After pondering for a moment, he then grabbed her hand and interlocked his fingers. You're currently only at the foundation stage. If you don't hurry and go into closed-door training to raise your cultivation, how are you going to follow me back to the divine realm? But she was really annoyed with cultivation. How many times had she repeatedly cultivated? Yu Yin bent down, hugged her into his embrace, and said with a sunken voice, Zhu Yao, you have always had your own ideas, so your master has never stopped you from doing anything in the past. But you can't make your master wait forever. His voice was calm, as usual, and carried a hint of coldness. Zhu Yao, however, faintly felt her heart being pierced. After a long while, she replied, All right, Master. Amen? In the future, call me Zhu Yao, all right? Yu Wang is pretty good, he said seriously. Your sister. Zhu Yao felt that Ghost King Peak was a little strange recently. Every time she woke up from her meditative state, she would find various unfamiliar things on her windowsill. In the beginning, it was a few fresh flowers, and they were placed on her windowsill with flowers and mud. She thought that it was a gift from her master, and was even excited for a good half a day. Her master was actually beginning to understand romance. However, when she brought out the potted-like flowers and asked a certain master for confirmation, the latter sternly denied it. Flowers? Firstly, this thing can't be used as medicine, and secondly, it can't be used to refine pellets. It doesn't even have ordinary insect repellent effects? What's the use of such weeds? Zhu Yao, who liked weeds, she, who believed that her master understood romance, was really stupid. But if it wasn't her master, who else could it be? She did not know many people in ancient Azure sect, and it was impossible for ZMO to give it to her. Wang Xiuji was nurturing his fetus. She couldn't possibly sleepwalk to pluck it, right? Unable to think of who it could be, Zhu Yao simply threw it to the back of her mind and continued to meditate. However, for the next few days, the things on her windowsill grew, and they were no longer limited to flowers. Slowly, there were various spiritual herbs, spiritual medicines, and even spiritual beast meat. When she woke up early in the morning, she saw a large row of fresh, bloody demonic beast meat hanging outside her window. As the wind blew, drops of blood would even drip down. Was this a gift or a New Year's goods? Hey? Zhu Yao grew more and more suspicious of this weirdo who gave her things. She loudly cursed and silently threw away all of the spiritual beast meat. After entering her meditative state, she would pay attention to the outside of the window, but she still could not see the figure of the person who gave her the things. Though, outside the window, the bloody scene from before did not appear again. The items were getting more and more creative and were developing towards the practical side. For example, hairpins, bracelets, jade ornaments, and other little toys used by girls. And every single one of them were mystic artifacts and could be used for defense or storage. Seeing that her current wealth was 0, Zhu Yao impolitely accepted all of them. Then, she calmly continued to cultivate. If only he had given her a transportation tool. However, someone could no longer remain calm. Yu Yin stared at the newly appeared handkerchief on his disciple's windowsill and was speechless. His expression grew colder. For some reason, he felt very unhappy, as though someone was trying to abduct his disciple. This was simply intolerable. With a flick of his finger, that handkerchief was instantly ignited, turning into ashes. A formation instantly appeared on the windowsill. Turning back to look at his disciple who was still meditating, he then turned and left the room. In the end, Zhu Yao's cultivation reached a point where she encountered some difficulties. She did not know why, but although she still possessed the lightning spirit vein, her cultivation was evidently not as fast as before. Forget about triggering a spiritual energy riot. She could not even absorb much spiritual energy when she simply guided spiritual energy into her body. Her cultivation had been stagnating as well. She felt as though she had instantly fallen from a top student to a bottom student. Half a month had already passed, and there was still no progress. This setting wasn't right. Zhu Yao opened her eyes. Just as she was about to discuss with her master, she suddenly heard a scream coming from outside the window. Ouch! Who? Zhu Yao immediately pushed open the door, only to see a snow-white demonic beast outside the window. It was currently slapping its own claws with all its might, and on its gigantic claws, there were still a few sparks that had yet to extinguish. It's you. Wasn't this that cowardly beast she met in the forest back then? That demonic beast stiffened and weakly raised its head to look at her. Then, as though it was frightened, it turned around and wanted to run. However, it did not step properly and slipped. In an instant, it rolled and crawled away. Was it really that scary? She turned to look at the position of the windowsill, only to see a small sword the size of an index finger had fallen at the side. It was actually a flying mystic artifact. Could it be that those things on the windowsill in the past few days were all placed there by this beastie? Clearly, it was afraid of her to death. So why did it give her these things? Were all demonic beasts' brains so weird? Thinking about it, this seemed to be a beast raised by ancient Azure sect. Zhu Yao felt that there was a need to ask about this beast's situation the next time she visited Wangsu. Before Zhu Yao could even ask about it, that strange beast had already delivered itself to her doorstep. Zhu Yao's cultivation did not improve, so she planned on practicing her sword arts. Yu Yin was guiding her at the side. Initially, she was practicing well, when her master's expression suddenly turned cold. Casting an art, a bolt of heavenly lightning struck towards a direction in the forest. Ow! A miserable cry resounded, and a pitch-black beast fell. Half of its white fur was even roasted by the lightning, but its reaction was very fast. With a furious roar, it immediately leapt up, pouncing towards Yu Yin. "It's you again," Zhu Yao exclaimed. That beast seemed to have just seen her, and with a plop, it fell from the sky. It instantly cowered and weakly glanced at her. Its entire body trembled, and it looked around in a fluster. And then, plop, 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 it hid behind Yu Yin. A certain someone did not hold back, and once again struck it with lightning, roasting the white fur on the other side as well. Zhu Yao. Chapter 239. Unexpectedly, that beast seemed to be completely fine. With a swoosh, it stood up again, and furiously roared at Yu Yin. The two sides confronted each other, one desperately roaring, the other desperately releasing cold air. Spectator Zhu Yao thought they stared at each other for half an hour, neither of them moving. Even Zhu Yao was a little worried that sparks would fly between this man and beast. Finally, that demonic beast turned its head and weakly glanced at Zhu Yao. Its claws shrunk, and then it turned around and ran away, disappearing without a trace. What on earth did it come here for? From then on, this demonic beast seemed to be pestering them. No matter what formation was laid down, it would always appear without anyone noticing. However, every single time, it would be unlucky enough to be caught by Yu Yin, and then it would be blasted away by lightning. However, for some unknown reason, this demonic beast was extremely afraid of her. As long as she appeared, it would run away faster than a rabbit. Even Zhu Yao herself was suspecting if she had done something inhumane to it in the past, to the point of leaving behind an indelible plot in its beast heart. 1 month later, Little Wimp's injuries were finally completely healed. His entire person had regained his usual demeanor. His green robes were exceptionally handsome, and his face was flushed red. If only he didn't have a big belly. Ziamo stood next to him with a worried look. With one hand on his back, the other on his stomach. Zhu Yao could not hold back, and had almost rushed forward to congratulate him. "Little Wimp, don't worry." Zhu Yao patted on his shoulders and consoled him. "There will always be a time like this in a lifetime. It doesn't hurt at all." Wang Xiuji's expression darkened. "Big sis Zhu Yao. I'm not pregnant." He was not giving birth. "Don't mind these details." Yu Yin immediately placed down layers upon layers of formations, and had Wang Xiuji sit at the center of the formations. With a sunken voice, he said, "In a while, I will guide down the 9 heavenly lightning. You need to use all your strength to block this attack." Wang Xiuji nodded and began to mobilize the spiritual energy in her dantian. Yu Yin cast an art, and his robes fluttered without any wind. Suddenly, the sky darkened, and a large number of thunderclouds filled the horizon. In just a moment, they covered the entire sky. He raised a hand, and lightning flashed across the sky. It was as if something was about to take shape. He lightly waved his hand, and at the same time, he turned to look at Zhu Yao. "Release the seal." Zhu Yao took a deep breath. She had long circulated her spiritual energy and connected it to the seal on Wang Xiuji's body. At the moment the heavenly lightning bolt descended, the seal was instantly released. In an instant, he arrived in front of Little Wimp. A formation as tall as a person appeared. The seal runes danced in the air, but they only appeared for a moment. In the next moment, it shattered. The black gas on Wang Xiuji's body seemed to have finally broken free from its shackles and instantly exploded. Her originally bulging belly also returned to its original shape at a speed visible to the naked eye. A purplish-red heavenly lightning. It directly tore through the sky and struck down, directly dispersing the black resentment that was spreading. Although Wang Xiuji had already used all his strength to resist the heavenly lightning, he was still unable to move. However, he could still feel the oppressive thunder pressure cutting at his internal organs like sharp blades. He could only do his best to protect his heart meridian. It seemed like an instant, but it felt like 10,000 years. Finally, the tribulation lightning disappeared. In a flash, Zmo, who had been waiting at the side, flew straight into the formation and pulled out the person whose entire body was still emitting lightning sparks. "Little wimp, are you all right?" Zhu Yao ran over. Yu Yin tapped his finger on his body, and in an instant, the remaining lightning sparks turned into lightning spiritual energy and directly entered his finger. Wang Shuji's expression instantly turned a lot better. "Thank you, Senior Martial Uncle." Wang Shuji opened his eyes. Amen, Yu Yin nodded, and just as he was about to seal the resentment in the center of the formation, suddenly, the entire ground began to tremble. With a loud boom, countless cracks appeared on the ground, and they extended in all directions. "Scatter!" Yu Yin reached out his hand to hug his disciple next to him, and immediately flew up. Zmo and Wang Shuji left the ground as well. With the formation that Little Wimp was sitting on as the center, the entire floating mountain began to break apart. "Not good. That Ghost King is about to break out of the seal." Zemo's expression changed. As expected, in the next second, the entire floating mountain shattered into countless pieces and fell down. A large amount of black gas was currently escaping from within and gathered into a gigantic human figure. Yu Yin frowned and no longer held back. Thunder rumbled in the sky, and countless purplish-red lightning sparks descended at the same time. They struck towards the Ghost King. The entire world was filled with lightning sparks, and before the Ghost King could completely condense, it was scattered by the heavenly lightning. In an instant, the entire place was filled with drifting black resentment. "What's that?" Zhu Yao pointed at the center of the resentment. That was a lump of white light, and it was especially obvious in the pitch-black darkness. There was a large amount of black gas in the surroundings, but under the lightning sparks, the black gas scattered, while that lump of white light was slowly rising. "That's the soul absorbed by the Ghost King." Yu Yin frowned. That white light rose higher and had already completely separated from the scattered black gas. Suddenly, like fireworks, it exploded. It scattered into countless of light spots, and then it disappeared into the horizon. The surroundings instantly quietened down. Zhu Yao was startled. "We won." "Not yet," Yu Yin replied with a sunken voice. Following the disappearance of that light spot, the black gas, which was still scattering in all directions earlier, suddenly charged straight into the sky. Its speed was so fast that no one could react to it. In an instant, it was as though a black curtain had been hung in front of their eyes, as it flew straight into the sky. Even the lightning clouds in the sky were devoured by that black gas. A large amount of darkness spread out in all directions. The light rays grew dimmer and dimmer. When Zhu Yao took a closer look, she saw that the entire sky was filled with the word bug. Zhu Yao was instantly dumbfounded. What kind of godly development was this? Hey, the entire world was filled with bugs. "Master." Zhu Yao habitually turned to look at Yu Yin. However, her back suddenly sank. Yu Yan's entire body was falling towards her. "Master." Zhu Yao was shocked as she reflexively caught him. However, she saw that his entire body seemed to have shrunk, and in an instant, he had turned into a child. He turned small again. Wasn't it already fine the last time? Why did he turn small again? Zhu Yao had no choice but to find a place to land while she could still see him. Little martial ant. Zmo flew over as well. When he saw the mystic version of his master, he was instantly startled. Ancestral martial ant. What's going on? I don't know either. Zhu Yao raised her head and looked at the strange sky. Earlier, when that resentment surged into the sky, her master had turned small. Back then, when she came to spiritual realm, her master had also turned small not long after passing through the sky. Could this be related to the world crossing door, or resentment? The amount of black resentment in the sky increased, as though it was infected. It had already spread to the entire sky. If this continued, the entire spiritual realm would most likely be enveloped by resentment. What to do? If this continued, spiritual realm would really be finished. Damned realm spirit. At least give me some hints, can't you? Ting. A familiar conversation window once again popped out. Zhu Yao's heart was filled with joy as she excitedly looked at the contents. She saw the words written in bold, eye-catching words, #congratulations. You have obtained Universal Dispel Incantation X1. Zhu Yao's eyes shone. Universal Dispel. It looked really cool. Hurry, hurry. Tell me what's the incantation? The red words flashed. In an instant, it changed to another line. Usage method and content. Please circulate all of the energy in your body and shout. What? #save me. #Zhu Yao. Save your sister. Even her master, the universal summon beast, had fallen asleep. What use was there in shouting for help? You're messing with me, right? You must be messing with me, right? Zhu Yao's heart was crumbling. The disciples of ancient Azure sect had all come out. Illumination mystic arts were lit up everywhere, and everyone was looking blankly at the sky. It was as though the entire world was enveloped in darkness. As the sky grew darker, even fire-type mystic arts were no longer effective, and they were faintly showing signs of extinguishing. Little martial ant. Zemo's face was filled with anxiety. Resentment is about to spread to the entire spiritual realm. What should we do? If spiritual realm was filled with resentment, the practitioners of the world would definitely be infected by resentment, and everyone would turn into puppets like the Ghost King. Zhu Yao gritted her teeth. She couldn't care so much anymore. So be it. Taking a deep breath, she circulated her spiritual energy. Using the loudest voice she had ever used in her life, she raised her head towards the sky and shouted, "Save me!" Miserable cries reverberated in the surroundings for a long while. The entire ancient Azure sect was filled with the echoes of "ah." The place, which was still bustling with noise earlier, instantly turned silent. Crowd. Countless disciples turned their heads to look at Zhu Yao one after another. P.S. As though they were looking at an idiot. However, nothing happened. Realm Spirit, this old lady isn't done with you. Suddenly, a loud roar rang out. It sounded like the roar of a beast, but it also carried a hint of spirituality. It seemed to come from the horizon, but it also seemed to be right beside one's ears. His voice was loud and resounded through the clouds, but it didn't sound ear-piercing at all. Instead, it made the knot in one's heart scatter and clear. As if giving an order, tens of thousands of beasts responded in unison. Roars rang out one after another. For a moment, all kinds of sounds could be heard. The sky, which had been pitch black just a moment ago, suddenly shone with rays of light. The black gas was like a rag that had been poked with thousands of holes. The sky became brighter and brighter, and the words "bug" that filled the sky also seemed to be erased, slowly disappearing. In less than a quarter of an hour, the sky was clear again, and not a single shadow of darkness could be found. The resentment that filled the sky disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared in the first place. Everything happened so quickly that no one could react. An apocalyptic crisis had inexplicably disappeared. Zhu Yao was embarrassed. Calling for help was really effective. Why didn't she feel any sense of accomplishment at all? The disappearance of the bug this time was a little inexplicable. In a situation where she completely did not know what happened, it just disappeared. Zhu Yao felt as though she was unable to step on solid ground. She felt that things were not that simple, but she could not figure out what she missed. What troubled her even more was the resentment in Little Wimp's body. Although the heavenly lightning had already dispersed a large half of it back then, a small half still remained in his body. She had tried various methods, and even used lightning's spiritual energy to wash his meridians, but she was still unable to expel the final strand of resentment. Big sis Zhu Yao, don't worry. This bit of resentment is fine. I can suppress it. Wang Shuji said without a care. Zhu Yao rolled her eyes at him, and then patted on his head. What are you trying to act tough for? Is resentment something fun to play with? Of course it's fine. You might be fine now, but who knows what will happen in the future? Wang Shuji lowered his head. More importantly, Zhu Yao turned to look at her sleeping master. Ever since that day, he had never woken up again. The last time he turned into a child, he had only slept for a single night. But this time, it had already been 3 days. He still did not show any signs of waking up. Yet, no matter how she checked his pulse, she could not find the reason. It was as though he was really just sleeping. She held onto his cold hand and could not help but feel anxious. She faintly felt that the reason why her master would occasionally turn into a child was definitely related to resentment. She had to find a way as soon as possible. Old man, is there really no way to completely extinguish resentment in this world? She turned to look at Ziamo at the side. He shook his head. There is indeed none. Resentment is something born from the heart in the first place, and it has no form. Naturally, it cannot be controlled by the living things in this world. But the resentment that filled the sky earlier had clearly disappeared. This proves that there is still something that can suppress resentment. Ziamo frowned. After a while, he said, that voice that dissipated resentment came from a strange place, and I do not know where it came from either. That voice that suddenly sounded earlier seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, and it was basically impossible to discern where it came from. Since demonic beasts could respond to it, even if that voice did not originate from demonic beasts, it must be greatly related to them. Zhu Yao analyzed. Old man, do you know of anyone in this world who can do this? If it's the practitioners of this world, there isn't anyone who has such strength. Ziamo pondered for a moment. As though he had thought of something, his expression suddenly changed. But I heard that at the end of this sky is the origin of all beasts, the sacred ground that all demonic beasts submit to. Maybe that place. Zhu Yao's eyes shone. You're saying that voice that extinguished resentment originated from there? It's possible. Ziamo nodded. His expression, however, turned a little heavy. However, the so-called sacred ground is merely a legend. No one has truly seen it before, and the land at the end of the sky is the end of spiritual realm. There's only a single absolute abyss, and if one were to fall into it, one's soul would simply scatter. Let's go take a look first. Zhu Yao stood up. Continuing to wait wasn't a solution either. The longer her master slept, the more worried she would be. I'll go as well. Wang Shuji pulled onto her hand. Big sis Zhu Yao, I'm not at ease if you go alone. Go my ass. Your body still has resentment. Zhu Yao forcefully stroked his head. Little wimp, why are you causing trouble for me? I'm no longer a child. Wang Shuji instantly exploded. Standing up, he was instantly a head taller than her. With big sis Zhu Yao's current cultivation, I'm not at ease. Yo, little wimp is rebelling. He actually dares to look down on my cultivation. Do you believe that I won't spank your buttocks? Let him go. Ziamo stood up to smooth things over. If there's really such a place, it would be convenient for him to disperse the resentment in his body. That seemed to make a little sense. She reluctantly nodded. All right, for the sake of his height. Zhu Yao carefully instructed Ziamo on various matters to take note of, and even left behind a communication talisman, so that if anything were to happen, he could immediately contact her. Just as she was about to step out of the door, she pondered for a moment, and then turned back into the house. She glanced at her master who was on the bed. Maybe, lowering her head, she kissed him. The person on the bed still did not have any reaction. All right, I'll give up. He's not a sleeping beauty, as expected. I won't be able to wake him up with a kiss. Leaving behind the petrified Ziamo, she flew away on her sword. Chapter 240. With her fastest speed, Zhu Yao flew towards the north on her flying sword. The surrounding scenery flashed past her, turning into streams of light. After flying for several hours, she still did not see the land at the end of the sky that Ziamo spoke of. Big sis Zhu Yao. Amen? Wang Shuji suggested. Let's rest for a while. We've already flown for an entire day. It's fine. Zhu Yao waved her hands. Big sis can hold on. Wang Shuji's expression sank as he pulled her. Big Sis Zhu Yao, we're not far away anymore. The land at the end of the sky is filled with dangers. It's better for us to rest for a while before heading over. Zhu Yao suppressed the impatience in the depths of her heart and nodded. All right. Below them was a dense forest. Zhu Yao immediately flew down, sat under a large tree, and meditated, recovering her HP and mana. Wang Shuji sat next to her and considerately passed her a bottle of spiritual spring. Thanks. Zhu Yao gulped it down and instantly felt her entire body was comfortable. Wang Shuji glanced at her and opened his mouth, looking as though he wanted to say something. What? Zhu Yao reached out her hand to stroke his head. Hurry up and say it. Don't hold it in. He clenched his fists, and a moment later, he squeezed out a smile. Big sis, Zhu Yao sure treats Sovereign Yu Yen well. Of course. After all, he was her man after all. Wang Shuji lowered his head. After a moment of silence, he carefully said, Big sis Zhu Yao, I want to ask, you and Ancestral Grand Master, you too. He paused halfway through his words. His fists clenched even tighter, and they were even faintly trembling. Zhu Yao turned her head and said with a smile, You want to ask, do we have an affair? He was startled for a moment, and then he suddenly raised his head, as though he never expected her to be so direct. Zhu Yao held onto her chin, pondered for a moment, and replied, To be precise, we've already had an affair many times. His face instantly paled, as though he had suffered some sort of blow. His blood drained, and a moment later, he anxiously said, But you two are master and disciple. Does the heavenly Tao stipulate that master and disciple can engage in dual cultivation? There were many master and disciple couples in the cultivation world, right? He sank into silence, as though he had sunk into some sort of emotion that he was unable to extricate himself from. His hands tightened even more, as though he was about to squeeze out blood. But, Big sis Zhu Yao, you clearly… Why? Zhu Yao sighed. Grabbing onto his hand, she carefully and resolutely pried out his fingers one by one. Are you trying to ask why I did not agree to your request and chose my master instead? He stared at her blankly for a moment. Tears slowly gathered in his eyes, and he looked as though he was about to cry. You knew? You've made it so clear. I'm not stupid. Zhu Yao shook her head, looked into his eyes, and said with emphasis on every single word, But, little wimp, are you certain that the love you have for me is truly the love between a man and a woman? Of course. He nodded heavily and held her hand. I've wanted to marry you since I was 10 years old. Zhu Yao smiled. 10 years old? Take me as a concubine? He gulped and anxiously explained. That was just a joke I made when I was young. I would naturally marry you alone as my wife. When you were young, Zhu Yao solemnly said. Then why did you want to marry me when you were young? That's naturally because I pulled down your pants and spanked your buttocks? Zhu Yao interrupted. You felt that you should take responsibility for me, otherwise, I won't be able to get married. He was silent for a moment before he nodded. Look, the reason you wanted to marry me when you were young wasn't because you liked me. You even said that it was a joke? Naturally, you couldn't treat it as real. That was indeed the case in the beginning. But later on, I truly wanted to be together with Big Sis Zhu Yao. Later on? Which later on? Zhu Yao asked. Wang Shuji was startled. He pondered on just when did his feelings towards her change. A moment later, he said, Later on, I grew up, and you came out of Jade Forest Mountain. I don't know the specifics either. You don't know, but I do. Zhu Yao stroked his head, which was already quite a bit taller than her own. It was from that time, when I was killed by a fox demon and died in front of you, right? He was dumbfounded for a moment. After pondering for a moment, it seemed like it really was that time. Little wimp, do you know what the feelings between a man and a woman are? When you entered the sect at the age of 10, you were the closest to me. However, that wasn't the feelings between a man and a woman. It was simply a form of dependence. We couldn't meet, and when we finally met, I died to save you. Zhu Yao analyzed the situation. How old were you back then? 15? You have never witnessed death, let alone it was because of you. The guilt of being powerless, the self-blame for not being able to save me. It was the knot in your heart that you couldn't untie back then, until I was reborn. Although the knot in your heart was untied, in your heart, the thought of wanting to protect something that you had lost and regained was firmly engraved in your heart. You thought that this thought was the feelings you had for me, but in reality, it was just your guilt. She sighed deeply. Little wimp, you never had the feelings between a man and a woman towards me. Big sis Zhu Yao. Wang Shuji was a little flustered as he shook his head. No, it's not like that. Shuji. Zhu Yao grabbed onto his shoulders and seriously looked into his eyes. With emphasis on every single word, she said, if you really have feelings for me, then why is it that after being reunited for so many days, even though you clearly had many chances, you had never once mentioned that you wanted to be together with me? Only when you knew that I was together with Master, did you finally say it out loud? He was suddenly stunned, and a hint of fluster flashed past his face. Because you completely didn't think of such a thing before, right? Little wimp, in the end. You simply treat me as a big sister, and liking someone doesn't require a reason. It's not responsibility, nor is it guilt. He had a dazed look, as though he understood, and as though he did not. He stared straight into her eyes, and after a long while, he solemnly said, then, big sis Zhu Yao, can you confirm that ancestral grand uncle and you have the feelings between a man and a woman? Of course. Zhu Yao nodded. She was a certain someone's first love. Why? He anxiously said. How can you be so sure that he doesn't treat you as his disciple? There's no need for confirmation. Zhu Yao pointed to her chest. As long as I clearly understand that he's the man that I want to be bound to in this lifetime, from his body to his heart, all of his rights must belong to the Zhu clan. That's enough. After a round of introspection, Wang Shuji turned silent for a long time. Along the way, he looked as though he was in deep thoughts. His expression would be conflicted for a while, and then relieved for a while. Zhu Yao knew that he would not be able to figure it out in a short period of time, so she no longer brought up this topic. Actually, she had long seen through Little Wimp's thoughts. In the past, she did not mind it, because she thought that he would be able to figure it out on his own. However, she did not expect that he would fall deeper and deeper into it. He looked soft, but he had been a stubborn child ever since he was young. When he entered the deity sect at the age of 10, it was normal for children to rely on their elders. And back then, she was his only relative. Adding the joke of marrying her as a concubine, he naturally treated her as his only support. Yet, she was imprisoned in Jade Forest Mountain in the beginning, and they could only communicate through letters. Since they could not meet, naturally, he could only rely on his imagination. In the depths of his heart, he drew a perfect image of her. After that, she left the mountain. Initially, this kind of imagination would return to normal, yet she died to save him. The pain of losing his loved ones and his own helplessness caused a knot to form in his heart. After that, although she helped him resolve it, the original pain still remained. Just like an injured person, no matter if he had fully recovered or not, he would habitually avoid his wounds. The more he saw her, the clearer he remembered it. He treated this guilt as his feelings for her, and could not see the difference between the two. He died because of her, and came to spiritual realm. Only after the two of them separated did he bury this guilt deep within his heart. If he were to say that his feelings for her were love, she would not believe it even if she was beaten to death. She had followed her master to spiritual realm for so many days. Although they might not stick together every single day, at the very least, they were quite intimate with each other. Things like hugging each other's waists, holding each other's hands, and they even slept together at night. If it was true love, how blind would he have to be to not be able to see it? Even if he did not lay his cards on the table, his emotions should have changed, right? Yet, he did not show the slightest bit of abnormality, and only asked her the truth now. In the end, he was just a little brother throwing a tantrum because his sister was about to be snatched away by another man. Zhu Yao sighed. Little Wimp was not stupid. He simply needed time to think things through. Along the way, the two of them did not bring up this topic again. This forest was very big, but strangely, the spiritual energy here was very thin. In order to save time, they walked into the forest and recovered their spiritual energy as they walked. Just in case, the two of them erected a defensive barrier and cautiously passed through. But unexpectedly, they were completely unobstructed. Forget about encountering any danger. There was not even a single boulder on the ground. Little Wimp, are you sure this place is very dangerous? I have indeed heard that there are many ferocious beasts here, and they are extremely hard to deal with. Wang Shuji had a confused look as well. It's probably because our luck is good. Zhu Yao curled her lips and did not mind it at all. However, the further they walked, the smoother it became. Forget about ferocious beasts. They did not even see a single rabbit. The weeds, which were initially overgrown with weeds, now looked as though they had been swept clean. There were only little flowers fluttering in the wind and the refreshing fragrance of the soil. Not even a moment later, a small path clearly appeared in the forest. Then, the small path turned into a large road. The large road turned into a wide road. And from a wide road, it turned into a dual carriageway. The ground was so flat that not even a single footprint could be seen. If this continued, would it become a high-speed road? We can't be on the wrong path, right? Zhu Yao pointed to the front. Wang Shuji was a little uncertain as well. The direction is indeed. Before he could even finish, something suddenly flashed in front of them. When they approached closer, they saw that there was an additional signboard by the side of the road. A row of simple black words were written on it: the land at the end of the heavens. The two of them. Why did they feel as though they were on a field trip? There was even a signboard. Big Sis Zhu Yao? What should they do? Let's take a look first. They continued to follow the signboard, but the further they went, the more strange things they saw. Occasionally, various signboards would appear by the side of the road. The distance to the endless land was still 20 kilometers, 10 kilometers, 8 kilometers. Slowly, various things that clearly did not belong to the vicinity, such as fresh flowers, spiritual springs, and even resting tree stumps, would appear by the side of the road. Wasn't this service a little too good? There wouldn't be a 5-star scenic spot of the endless land sign appearing later, right? Since you're treating us so well, I wonder if you're providing us with meals? Zhu Yao joked. In the end, at the side of the road less than 50 meters in front of them, a large pile of spiritual fruits appeared, and a few of them were even rolling happily. The two of them, Big Sis Zhu Yao. Wang Shuji's expression changed, as though he wanted to say something. Zhu Yao signaled him with her eyes, picked up 2 fruits, and stuffed one into his hands. Then, she pulled him to sit on the tree stumps at the side, wiped the fruit, and loudly said, "I wonder if these fruits have been washed? Little Wimp, do you still have the spiritual spring from earlier?" Wang Shuji immediately understood and shook his head. "I had already finished drinking them earlier. Then what should we do? I'm not going to eat fruits that haven't been washed." Wang Shuji had a troubled look. With a dong sound, a bamboo tube filled with water rolled out from the forest. As though it was being blown by the wind, it rolled in their direction. Over there, Zhu Yao stood up, and a bolt of heavenly lightning struck in the direction of the bamboo tube. Wang Shuji's fingers materialized a chain, which instantly turned into a net and flew in the direction of the heavenly lightning bolt. With a flash of lightning, a large tree was snapped in half, and a white figure flashed out. Restrain. Wang Shuji's net flew towards the shadow. Unfortunately, the white shadow was even faster. It flew out like a ray of light and landed on the ground, transforming into a snow-white demonic beast. It let out an angry roar. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. Wasn't this that stupid beast that came to the mountain to harass her every day? Just how big of a grudge did they have to chase him all the way here? Supreme Bai Yuan. Wang Shuji suddenly cried out in astonishment. "Why are you here?" Ho, the demonic beast bared its teeth in dissatisfaction. This attitude isn't right. Why was Little Wimp so polite to this beastie? Little Wimp, Is it raised by your sect? No, no. He is. Wang Shuji shook her head, but she didn't know how to explain. Is he or isn't he? What did he mean? Your Honor, it is not an ordinary demonic beast. Extraordinary? Was it especially stupid? Wang Shuji gave her a "I will explain to you later" expression. Riding on his sword, he flew into the forest and respectfully bowed towards that white demonic beast. This disciple did not know that it was your honor, which was why I had offended you. Your honor, please forgive me. Ho! That demonic beast clearly did not appreciate his kindness and was so furious that even the fur on its tail was standing on end. Your honor, we entered the sacred ground because we had no other choice, and we did not mean to offend you. Wang Shuji's face was filled with anxiety. This matter is all my fault. If your honor wishes to hold me accountable, please punish me alone. This disciple will definitely not complain. Ru, that demonic beast really raised its claws and slapped towards Wang Shuji. The hell? Zhu Yao's fury instantly erupted as she loudly roared. You dare! That beast trembled, and its claws instantly stopped above Wang Shuji's head. As Zhu Yao ran over, she shouted, If you dare to slap down, this old lady here will peel off your skin. You dare to bully my family's little wimp? That beast seemed to have only just noticed her as its eyes grew wider. Before she could even walk over, a white figure flashed, and it fled in a fluster. It climbed up the nearest big tree and hugged onto the tree trunk as it trembled like a candle in the wind. It was even trying to cover up its overly snow-white body with all its might. The entire beast seemed to be saying, You can't see me. You can't see me. You can't see me. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. Recalling the claw it used to slap towards little wimp earlier, her fury once again surged. Come down. The tree trunk trembled. Are you coming down or not? The tree trunk trembled with all its might. I will count to 3. Trembling messily in the wind. 1. Trembling like a violent storm. 2. Trembling like a broken tree. 3. Before her voice fell, swoosh, a snow-white beastie appeared in front of her. Like a well-trained large dog, it obediently squatted down and did not even dare to blink its eyes. It was as obedient as it could be. Chapter 241. Do you know your wrongs? Zhu Yao glared at it. Oh! That demonic beast let out a wronged cry. Big sis Zhu Yao. Wang Shuji glanced at that demonic beast and then looked at Zhu Yao. His face was filled with disbelief. You. It. How can you? Why can't I? She still wanted to ask. After all, he was a sect master, right? Why did he have to be so polite to a domesticated beast? Wang Shuji anxiously tugged onto her sleeves. Big sis Zhu Yao, he's, roar. The demonic beast reverted to its old habits and roared at Wang Shuji. Zhu Yao turned around and glared at it. Shut up. Oh. It instantly cowered. Zhu Yao raised her hand and slapped the beast's head. As a domesticated beast, you must be united and friendly, and get close to humans. If I ever see you bullying my little wimp again, I will skin you alive. Oh, you. Its eyes were filled with tears. Also, don't follow me anymore. Otherwise, I will really beat you up. The beastie was startled. As though it could no longer hold it in, its tears flowed out like an open tap. Woo-woo. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. You're still crying? The demonic beast trembled. Its tears stopped, but it choked. Cough. It burped. Why aren't you leaving yet? As it burped, it looked at her with sparkling tears. The moisture in its eyes grew larger and larger. Wah! It finally broke down. Scattering its little tears along the way, it ran into the forest and did not turn back. Ting! A familiar conversation window instantly popped up in front of her. Congratulations, you have achieved. Inhumanely harming a pure and innocent world guardian beast, shattering a pure beast heart. Title reward. Hui, you shameless human. Zhu Yao. This was a curse, right? This was definitely a curse, right? Big sis Zhu Yao. Wang Shuji looked at her with a tearless look. Just what was that? She was just an innocent bystander who did not know the truth. Hey, big sis Zhu Yao, before you entered spiritual realm, you have never seen Sovereign Bai Yuan? Wang Shuji said strangely. I only saw that strange beast in ancient azure sex forest, and I was almost swallowed. How is this possible? Wang Shuji was shocked. Exalted Bai Yuan is the guardian beast of the entire spirit realm. Without his permission, no one can enter the spirit realm from the underworld. Big sis Zhu Yao, just how did you come to spiritual realm? It sounded impressive, but I flew directly from the sky and came here. Who knew that he needed a beast's permission? Wang Shuji was even more shocked. But when crossing worlds, there's a section of the abyss of eternity. Didn't big sis Zhu Yao see it? Is there such a thing? I didn't see it. According to Wang Shuji, there was a place called the abyss of eternity between the spirit world and the netherworld. It was a land of death, and anything that entered would be devoured, including souls. The only way to safely pass through was to be led by the realm guardian beast, Bai Yuan. As for what beast it was, where did it come from? How strong were they? No one knew, but everyone who entered the spiritual realm was led by it. Even more so, no one knew what rank demonic beast it was. The only thing they knew was its name, Bai Yuan. It had an irreplaceable position in spiritual realm. No matter how arrogant and cool a human practitioner was, they had to respectfully address it as exalted Bai Yuan. And it was precisely because of this that the relationship between human practitioners and demonic beasts in spiritual realm was especially harmonious. Zhu Yao was a little dumbfounded when she heard this. She was simply unable to connect that demonic beast with such a high and mighty position earlier. Rather than calling it a guardian beast, Zhu Yao felt that it was more like a mascot for the entire spiritual realm, the kind that guaranteed safe entry and exit. Exalted Bai Yuan has always been casual and would often wander around the various sects or stay for a short period of time. Wang Shuji explained. Back when the Ghost King appeared, the reason why I went to the Netherworld was coincidentally because Exalted Bai Yuan was in my ancient Azure sect. She seemed to have offended some incredible beastie. Spiritual realm is different from other cultivation worlds. No matter if one ascends to the higher realm or enters the Netherworld, Bai Yuan's permission is required. Otherwise, one will fall into the abyss of eternity. If it's light, one's soul will be sent flying, and if it's heavy, one will never reincarnate. The more Zhu Yao listened, the more guilty she felt. Though Exalted Bai Yuan is in beast form, I heard that he has existed in this world ever since the birth of spiritual realm, and his strength is unfathomable. Little wimp, Emin? Say, is it too late for me to apologize to him right now? Evidently, it was too late, because that beast had already disappeared without a trace a long time ago. Forget it. In any case, it was not the first or second time she offended that beast. Furthermore, was it really appropriate to set up such a high and mighty demonic beast? The god race expressed their dissatisfaction. After walking for another half an hour, the sky suddenly darkened, and the spiritual energy in the air had thinned to an inconceivable degree. It was as though the further they went, the lesser the spiritual energy. Big sis Zhu Yao. Wang Shuji suddenly spoke up. Amen? When she turned to look, she saw that he was suddenly sweating profusely. His face was pale, and he looked like he was in pain. Little wimp, what's wrong? Zhu Yao was shocked as she hurriedly supported him to sit down. Wasn't he still fine earlier? Wang Shuji shook his head. With a weak look, he still pointed to the front and said, Big sis Zhu Yao, the land at the end of the sky should be right in front of us. Zhu Yao took a closer look and saw a large area that looked like a chasm had appeared in the sky. It was as though a green forest had been forcefully cut off. One side was lush with greenery, while the other was empty. Nothing could be seen clearly, and the surroundings were strangely quiet, as though all the sounds in the world had disappeared. Zhu Yao separated a strand of spiritual energy to press on his meridians, and a moment later, she suddenly widened her eyes. Why did the resentment in your body suddenly become chaotic? I don't know either. Wang Shuji shook his head. It's just that the closer we get to the land at the end of the sky, the more restless the resentment in my body becomes. Zhu Yao's heart sank. Could it be that the land at the end of the sky really had something that could affect resentment? Calming her heart, she cast an art to first help Wang Shuji suppress his resentment. For a moment, she was a little hesitant as to whether she should continue forward. Big sis Zhu Yao, since we're actually here, we definitely have to find out the truth. Wang Shuji said, Don't worry, I'm fine. At a time like this, why are you still trying to act tough? Shut up. Zhu Yao knocked on his head. With your current state, even if we enter, you'll only be a burden to me. He lowered his head. All right, I'll first head over there to take a look. If the resentment in your body goes berserk again, then head back first. There's no need to wait for me. But, no buts. Zhu Yao glared at him. He's that perverted. That empty space was less than 100 meters away from them. Initially, she did not feel it, but as she approached it, Zhu Yao felt a sense of pressure. Even the spiritual energy in her body was uncontrollably scurrying about, as though it was about to break out of her body. Her chest felt incredibly stuffy, as though she was about to suffocate. Even though she was clearly in a dense forest, strong winds were blowing in her surroundings, causing her to feel chills. She was beginning to feel that something was amiss. The wind was blowing even stronger, causing her cheeks to hurt. With every gust, her body would feel colder, as though she did not have any spiritual energy to resist the cold. Wait a minute, spiritual energy. Zhu Yao was startled. Circulating the spiritual energy in her body, she realized that there was not much spiritual energy left in her dantian. That wind was actually able to disperse the spiritual energy in her body. Zhu Yao immediately increased her speed and dodged into the forest. However, as though the wind had eyes of its own, it immediately changed its direction and blew straight towards her. Big sis Zhu Yao. Wang Shuji realized her abnormality as well and chased after her. Don't get hit by the surrounding wind. Zhu Yao loudly reminded. The wind will disperse the spiritual energy in your body. Little Wimp's footsteps paused, and he reacted. In an instant, he changed his direction, dodging the incoming wind. For a moment, the two of them had no choice but to jump up and down in this forest. But wind was formless and intangible, and was basically impossible to capture. They could only dodge based on their instincts. It was still all right in the beginning, but after a long time, she would eventually be blown away. Zhu Yao could already feel the meager amount of spiritual energy in her body. She dodged here and there, and unknowingly, she was getting closer to that empty space, until she could no longer circulate a single strand of spiritual energy in her body. When she dodged, her feet stepped on empty air. She suddenly realized that she had already reached the very edge. Beside her feet was a bottomless chasm, and behind her was a land of nothingness. Zhu Yao took in a cold breath. Mamma mia! Fortunately, she stopped in time. Otherwise, she would have fallen down. Fortunately. Suddenly, a white figure leapt out from the forest and pounced straight towards her. A familiar beast's roar resounded in her ears, along with Little Wimp's terrified voice. Zhu Yao's entire body was thrown backwards, and she fell straight into that empty space. The hell? A phrase could not help but surface in her mind. It's never too late for a beastie to take revenge 10 years later. My ass. Just what kind of grudge did she have with this demonic beast? Zhu Yao fell into that empty space at the end of the sky, and she even received a stupid beast as a scapegoat. That empty space was very deep, and she felt as though her entire body was about to fall apart. Every single bone in her body was creaking in pain, yet the culprit beast was completely fine. Probably because it had gotten its revenge, it circled around her for a few rounds. It was so happy that it was jumping up and down, and its mouth was even letting out excited sounds. Oh, you. I'm down. I'm down. I'm finally down. That voice was soft and soft, just like a child's. After circling a few rounds, it actually began to roll on the ground. Shut up. Zhu Yao fiercely glared at it. She spent a great deal of effort to sit up, and she did not think about why it suddenly knew how to speak. She simply felt that it was making her hurt even more. As expected, Bai Yuan stopped and obediently sat next to her. Its gigantic white beast head stretched over, and its two bell-sized black eyes stared straight at her. Yao Yao, what? Zhu Yao was shocked, as she had a bad premonition. That pair of eyes, however, grew brighter, and the soft voice once again sounded. I want to kiss you. Ah. Bai Yuan widened its mouth, and with an ahu sound, it sucked Zhu Yao into its mouth. It grinded her up and down a few times, and with a piyub sound, it spat out a Zhu Yao whose entire body was covered in saliva. Wiping off the sticky saliva, Zhu Yao's hands trembled. She felt that the string called reason had snapped straight, and was currently letting out creaking sounds that were about to snap. Bai Yuan, who had smeared her face with saliva earlier, licked its lips, and its beast face scrunched up into a ball. Turning its head, it retched. Ugh. Hair. Stuck. After retching for a moment, it turned its head around with a wronged look. I didn't wash my hair. Bada. Her reason completely collapsed. Wash your sister. She grabbed onto its shining white beast head, grabbed onto the whiskers at the side of its mouth, and fiercely pulled them out. What qualifications do you have to despise me? This old lady here has yet to settle the debt of pushing me down with you. You actually dare to despise me? Who asked you to despise me? Who asked you to despise me? You're the one who didn't wash your hair. You didn't even wash your hair at home. Oh, you. Bai Yuan let out a series of miserable cries and began to roll on the ground. Its claws waved about in the air, yet it did not dare to wave them at her. Only after Zhu Yao had completely pulled out all of its whiskers did it finally kick open its meaty beast body and stopped while panting heavily. Woo! Bai Yuan used its front claws to cover its beast mouth, which was already swollen, and laid on the ground like a quail. Its eyes were filled with accusations towards her evil deeds. What the hell are you looking at? Zhu Yao glared at it, as she wanted to flare up the moment she saw it. Ugh, you're not allowed to cry. Its cries instantly stopped, turning into suppressed sobs. Zhu Yao could not be bothered with it, as she carefully inspected her surroundings. It was completely dark, as though the heavens and the earth had become one. She did not see the revival dialogue box, which proved that she was still alive. However, where was this place? The end of the world? Why was there nothing here? Staying here wasn't a solution either. Taking a deep breath, she dragged her aching body and walked forward step by step. Earlier, she had tried it, and her body did not have a single strand of spiritual energy. Not only that, she could not even sense the existence of spiritual energy. This proved that her cultivation had regressed, and it had regressed back to before, turning into a regular mortal. That strange wind earlier did not blow away the spiritual energy in her body, but her cultivation. With her current situation, if she did not find a way out, she would starve to death here. She walked aimlessly for half a day, yet she did not discover anything. The surroundings were abnormally quiet, and the only sounds she could hear were the sounds of breathing. 2 breaths. Why are you following me? Zhu Yao turned around and glared behind her. A certain beast which maintained a distance of 5 steps trembled. Its large eyes still had traces of tears that had yet to dry. It weakly glanced at her, and then it hurriedly sprinted towards her. A white paw was placed horizontally in front of her, and it looked as though it was facing death with equanimity. I'll pluck, paw, fur more. It raised its paw again, as large tears filled its eyes. Pluck fur, don't go. What did he mean? He wanted her to continue plucking its fur? You're a masochist, right? Seeing that she did not make a move after a long while, it grew anxious, as it forcefully stuffed its paw into her bosom. Pluck, pluck. Bai Yuan won't hurt. After plucking, we'll be friends. Don't ignore me. Why did she feel a sense of guilt as though she was bullying a little kid? Be friends, all right? It sniffled, as though it was trying its best not to cry. It then used its paw to push her hand. I'll let you pluck. If it's not enough, I still have 3 more paws. Chapter 242. Looking at the snow-white claw in front of her, the fury in Zhu Yao's heart instantly disappeared completely. She took a deep breath and suppressed the irritation in her heart. She knew that her emotions were not right. Her anger towards Bai Yuan was mostly just to vent her anger. Her master had fainted, the resentment in little Wimp's body had not been dispelled, and he had even fallen into this damned place with his cultivation completely destroyed. Under such circumstances, not to mention having a good temper, she was so irritable that she wanted to kill someone, all right? Therefore, even though she knew that Bai Yuan had no ill intentions towards her, she still couldn't control her anger. Moreover, it was it that had pushed her down. I'm sorry. Zhu Yao sighed and reached out her hand to pat on its beast head. Bai Yuan, let's talk about life. Oh? It looked at her with its big watery eyes, then at its paws. Claw, claw? I'm not going to pull it out. It was already like this. How could she still pull it out? Its misty eyes became clearer. It put down its claws and carefully squatted next to her. Where should I start? Why do you keep following me? Bai Yuan stepped on his front paws a little helplessly and said with a stutter, I like Yao Yao. I said before friends. Must be. Its huge head drooped lower and lower, and it looked a little bashful. Zhu Yao was actually able to see a hint of shyness and timidity on that furry face. She must be blind. Then why did you push me off? What kind of friend are you? It replied very quickly, because I have to take you to see it. Look? Zhu Yao blanked. Look at what? Bai Yuan stood up with a whoosh and ran a few steps towards the left. Then, he eagerly ran back. Let's go take a look. Let's go take a look. Wait a minute. Zhu Yao followed. What are you bringing me to see? Yao Yao, come. Come quickly. It's right in front. Apparently, it already had this plan. It jumped and jumped excitedly, leading the way in front. Look, look. What are you looking at? A thought flashed in Zhu Yao's mind. You've been here before? Roar. It nodded its head. Then do you know the way out? Bai Yuan knows. It puffed out its chest, its face filled with pride. Would it kill you to say so earlier? She thought she was going to die here. She was currently using her original avatar. Her heart would ache if she died. All right? Are you familiar with this place? Bai Yuan knows everything about this place. It hopped in front, leading the way. Is there any person or item here that can dispel resentment? Human? Bai Yuan paused for a moment, tilted his head to look at her, and said with some embarrassment, There's only one person here. Who? There really was someone. It seemed that this trip was not in vain. I'll bring you there. Bai Yuan happily ran in front. Zhu Yao did not waste any time either, and immediately followed after him. After walking for about a quarter of an hour, a ray of light suddenly appeared in the dusky sky, and a thin silver-white line appeared in front of them. It was a long line that extended infinitely, as if it had split the world into two. When she got closer, she realized that it was actually a river. It was silvery white in color, and the river was so wide that she couldn't see the end of it. She had only seen such a peculiar river once. River of Forgetfulness? Why would the River of Forgetfulness appear here? Had she returned to the netherworld? But the style was evidently not right. Bai Yuan changed his direction and ran a few steps upstream. Let's head up at the source. We'll be there soon. Source. This river was so wide. She did not even know how far the so-called source was. It was still fine in the past, but now that she did not have the slightest bit of cultivation, she would probably die, right? Zhu Yao followed after it in despair, and instantly felt that her footsteps had become several tons heavier. We're here. Eh, so fast? She had only walked for 10 minutes, right? Zhu Yao raised her head to look, and on the surface of the river in front of her, a gigantic white palace had appeared, spanning across the entire river of forgetfulness. That palace was extremely gorgeous, and every single part of it seemed to be built using the purest white stones. From afar, it looked like a snow-white curtain that was hung in the sky, and it was a little dazzling to the eyes. It's so white, I'll get snow blindness, right? Zhu Yao silently retorted. Bai Yuan, the person you spoke of lives here? Oh, then how do we get there? That palace was floating on the surface of the river, and she did not know how to swim. Fly, fly, Ao Bai Yuan roared. He suddenly rose into the sky and flew towards that palace. Wait a minute. Bring me along. I don't know how to fly, hey. Bai Yuan had already turned into a ray of white light and disappeared in an instant. What happened to the promise of being friends? Looking at the vast river surface, Zhu Yao felt like crying. Just as she was hesitating if she should use the dog paddle style to swim over, a green suddenly appeared in the river, and it was especially obvious on the snow-white river surface. The green dot grew larger, and when she took a closer look, it was actually a flower bud. Zhu Yao took 2 steps forward, and that flower bud suddenly bloomed. It grew larger and larger, and in the end, it turned into a lotus the size of a wash basin. And above the lotus at the center, a golden arrow was floating. Was it telling her to step on it? Using her feet to test the waters, Zhu Yao hesitated for a moment before taking a step onto it. She never expected that this lotus would be so sturdy. Forget about falling, it did not even sway, and was as stable as flat ground. She did not know what breed it was, but Zhu Yao had the urge to transplant it back. The moment she stood still, another lotus bloomed a step away from her. Could it be that this lotus was a chain store? Zhu Yao stepped over with a heart filled with doubts. Hence, with every step she took, a lotus like this would bloom in front of her. As though it was paving a path, it bloomed all the way to the palace in the middle of the river. She arrived in front of the palace without any obstructions. The moment she stepped onto the stone steps, the row of lotuses behind her instantly withered and fell into the river bottom. This should be some sort of wood-type formation. Zhu Yao walked onto the stone steps, and the entire white palace was in front of her. It stood tall and majestic, emitting a majestic aura. The strange thing was, it was strangely quiet. Forget about people, not even a fly could be seen in the surroundings. Bai Yuan, who came up first? Where did he run off to? Running into someone else's territory just like that, she wondered if it would attract the owner's disgust. Passing through the plaza in front of the palace, Zhu Yao hesitated for a moment and decided to greet him. Is there anyone here? Complete silence. She could not help but raise her hand to knock on that large door. Initially, she thought that there would not be any response, but that large white door suddenly rumbled and slowly opened inwards. The interior of the palace was snow-white as well. Zhu Yao walked in and saw a tall platform at the innermost side of the palace. A man was currently sitting on the only chair on the tall platform. He was dressed entirely in white, and even his hair was silvery white. Seeing her enter, he revealed a set of white teeth with a slight smile. Zhu Yao subconsciously turned her head. Just how much did this person like the color white? Her eyes were about to be blinded by it. Ho ho, hi. Zhu Yao habitually greeted him. You're here. A voice that was as warm as water resounded. Even though the voice was not loud, it felt as though it was right next to her ears, and it was clearly transmitted into the depths of her heart. Zhu Yao faintly felt that this voice was a little familiar, yet she could not recall where she had heard it before. You know me? His smile deepened. Zhu Yao, I have been waiting for you. Waiting for me? What did he mean? He stood up and walked down from the tall platform. Only then did Zhu Yao see his appearance clearly. Sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. Though he was not a peerless beauty, for some reason, he gave off a gentle feeling. Realm Spirit said that you're the only person who can help me. You know Realm Spirit? Zhu Yao was stunned. After fixing so many bugs, this was the first time she heard an NPC know of Realm Spirit's name. He paused for a moment and then slowly nodded. I guess I know him. What do you mean by guess? Do you know who he is? Where is he? Why do you need me to fix this bug? His smile grew even gentler. You will know in the future. The hell? It's as good as not saying anything. What do you mean by I can help you? His expression sank. Suddenly, he reached out a hand, and a black miasma formed from the letters bug appeared in his palm. Resentment. Zhu Yao seemed to recognize it at first glance. Why is it here as well? Could it be? You're the person who eliminated the Ghost King that day? You're able to remove resentment. No. He shook his head. Clenching his fist, the resentment instantly disappeared. I'm merely temporarily locking it down. Locking it down? Resentment is formless and undying. Even if it's me, I can only temporarily lock it down. He frowned. But the amount of resentment in this world will only increase. In the beginning, it was still fine, but millions of years have passed. Even if it's me, there will come a day when my strength is exhausted. Millions of years? Zhu Yao caught onto a keyword. Did he mean to say that he had already existed for millions of years? That was the beginning of the world, when even the ancient gods did not exist. He had already existed back then? Just who in the world are you? That gentle smile still hung on his face, and he softly said, My name is River of Forgetfulness. River of Forgetfulness. Zhu Yao suddenly widened her eyes. Ho ho, it can't be that River of Forgetfulness, right? He waved his hand, and in an instant, the entire white hall disappeared. Beneath their feet was the silvery white river of forgetfulness, and they were currently floating above the surface of the river. The man softly said, It's just as you think. I'm this river of forgetfulness. Zhu Yao felt as though her brain had crashed. River of forgetfulness. He was River of Forgetfulness. This river was asking her for help. What could she do? Wash away sand. Since the beginning of the world, I have been in this underworld, erasing the imprints of all living beings in this world, restoring the original appearance of the soul. River of Forgetfulness continued. However, some of these imprints can be erased, while some cannot. Resentment can't? He nodded. Resentment affects the soul, and a soul that carries resentment will recall the matters of its past life. If resentment does not dissipate, it will cause many unforeseen events, causing the collapse of this world. That's why I cannot allow resentment to remain in my soul. However, even if it leaves my soul, it will still not dissipate. I can only seal it. He once again waved his hand, and the silvery river suddenly split into two, revealing the bottom of the river. However, she saw that the bottom of the river was filled with a deep darkness, and it was so dense that it could not be seen how deep it was. The deep darkness was constantly tumbling, and occasionally, a strand of it would appear. Zhu Yao took a closer look, and that black color was densely filled with the word bug. The bottom of the river was actually filled with resentment. Just how many years did this terrifying amount of resentment accumulate for? Beneath such a pure river water was actually a place to seal resentment. River of Forgetfulness lowered his hand, and the surface of the river once again closed up, returning to its original silvery white color. He turned his head and looked at her with a gentle expression, starlight flashing in his eyes. Why are you looking at me with such hope? I really don't know how to dispel resentment. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come here to look for you. Since Realm Spirit said you can do it, then naturally you really can. River of Forgetfulness said with a confident look. But I don't know anything about resentment at all. Otherwise, Little Wimp would have been fine a long time ago. He shook his head. You don't know right now, because the time isn't right yet. Then when will the time be right? He smiled and did not reply. Instead, he looked at her with an even more focused gaze. You can do it. Don't be so confident in me. What if I go overboard? Before that day arrives, I will continue to wait. He raised his hand, and a formation instantly appeared beneath her feet. Zhu Yao felt her body lightening, and the formation brightened. Wait a minute. She had yet to finish her question. I still have something to do. In the next moment, she was surrounded by white light, and a faintly discernible voice sounded in her ears. Don't worry. The person you're concerned about has nothing to do with resentment. Big Sis Zhu Yao. Little Wimp's voice sounded in her ears. Her waist tightened, and in the next moment, she had already risen into the sky. Wang Shuji brought her several meters away and said with a worried look, Big Sis Zhu Yao, are you all right? I'm fine. Zhu Yao turned around to look. She had once again returned to that chasm at the end of the sky. How can you stand there? It's too dangerous. What if you fall in? Little Wimp said with a worried look. Fall in? Zhu Yao widened her eyes. Didn't she already fall in? This place is too dangerous. The wind can actually scatter spiritual energy. It's not advisable to stay here for long, he suggested with a stern look. Zhu Yao felt that it was a little strange. She had clearly fallen in for so long. So why did Little Wimp look like he did not know about it at all? Could it be that the flow of time in the land at the end of the sky was different from in spiritual realm? She suddenly felt that there was something in her hands. Lowering her head to take a look, it was a silvery white pearl, which looked extremely similar to the color of that palace. What was this? Was this given to her by River of Forgetfulness? She clenched her fists, only to realize that her cultivation had once again recovered. Big Sis Zhu Yao, it seems like there's no way to eliminate resentment here. Let's head back? She nodded and followed Wang Shuji back to Ancient Azure Sect. Regarding the bug this time, she finally had some clues. Previously, she had always thought that it was that Ghost King, or the resentment on that Ghost King's body. Only now did she realize that Realm Spirit wanted her to eliminate all resentment. Under the River of Forgetfulness, the accumulated resentment for billions of years, if it were to rush out, not only the underworld, the entire 3 realms would be affected. This was basically a super huge bug. Yet, she did not have the slightest clue as to the specific solution. This wasn't like making a game, where one could simply delete the game if they encountered a problem. Most likely, even Realm Spirit himself did not know how to solve it, otherwise, he wouldn't have left it alone for so long. She felt that she had encountered the biggest problem ever since she transmigrated. Her master still had not woken up, and Little Wimp's situation was worsening. The resentment in his body was beginning to go out of control, and it was rampaging in his meridians, causing his spiritual energy to be unable to gather, and even endangering his dantian. This caused him to once again fall into unconsciousness. Chapter 243. ZMO had been the sect master for his entire life. No, he was the sect master for 2 lifetimes. It had always been smooth sailing. Although he did not ascend the immortal Tao, he was satisfied. Every single disciple in his sect had great trust in him, and the sect he was in was becoming more prosperous with each passing day. No matter if it was the cultivation world of the past or the current spiritual realm, as long as the name ZMO was mentioned, there would not be anyone who would not raise their thumbs up and praise him, saying that he was the best. However, in such a perfect human life, there were 2 variables, and they were variables that even death could not shake off. That's right, it was the master and disciple duo on Jade Forest Mountain. Little Martial Uncle, the method you mentioned is really inappropriate, ZMO said with a heavy heart. Let's not talk about whether or not you're able to draw out the resentment in Shuji's body. Even if you succeed, with your current cultivation, it will only be worse than his. When the resentment goes berserk, it will be uncontrollable. You have to have confidence in me. Zhu Yao patted on Zemo's shoulders. This wasn't a matter of confidence. It was a matter of whether or not you were going to throw your life away. Little Martial Uncle, it's not that I want to make things difficult for you. Shuji is my disciple, so I'm naturally extremely anxious as well. But if I were to get you involved because of a moment of impatience, then the loss would outweigh the gain. Don't worry, I'll be careful. Resentment is extremely dangerous. It's not something that can be resolved just by paying attention to it. Little Martial Uncle, I absolutely won't agree to you guiding Shuji's resentment into your own body. Oh, Zhu Yao replied especially seriously. I'm not asking for your opinion either. He took an arrow to the knee. Jade Forest Mountain disciples and whatnot. He hated them the most. Ziamo wanted to cry, but no tears came out. If he really allowed her to guide resentment into her body, when Ancestral Grand Uncle wakes up, he would kill him, right? It definitely would. Thinking of a certain person's frosty expression, he couldn't help but shiver. In an instant, he felt that the room had become much colder. Steeling his heart, he pulled Zhu Yao. Little martial ant, no matter what, you can't commit suicide like this. If you insist on doing so, I will die in front of you. Then die. Zhu Yao was getting a little annoyed by his pestering as well. Why don't you try and die? Ziamo was stunned, and for a moment, he did not know how to continue. Zhu Yao helped Wang Shuji up from the bed and sat cross-legged behind him. Seeing that he still looked as though he had suffered a huge blow, she sighed. Old man, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. He took out the white pearl from his bosom and handed it over. If I also fall into a deep sleep like little wimp, help me pass this to my master. This was given to her by the river of forgetfulness. She could not tell what it was, but she faintly felt that it might be useful to her master. Ziamo received it, and seemed like he still wanted to say something. Zhu Yao had already closed her eyes and circulated her spiritual energy into Wang Shuji's meridians. She had been a game designer in the modern world for so many years. The number of bugs she had fixed was more than the number of deaths she had experienced. She didn't believe that this so-called resentment could not be eliminated. As long as it was a bug, there would definitely be a patch that could be patched. As the saying goes, as long as the hoe is wielded well, there is no wall that cannot be dug down. What's wrong? But to fix it, one must first know where the loophole is. That was why she wanted to draw the resentment on Little Wimp's body onto herself. Only by deeply understanding the composition of resentment would she be able to find a way to deal with it. Shennong, on the other hand, had to taste hundreds of herbs to know the effects of medicine, didn't he? Taking a deep breath, Zhu Yao continued to circulate her spiritual energy, probing Little Wimp's meridians. From the Divine Palace all the way to the Dantian, there was only pure fire spiritual energy in his body. Only when she neared the Dantian did she faintly discover strands of black miasma. That black miasma and fire spiritual energy were intertwined together, and with just a single step, they would converge towards the source of spiritual energy, the Dantian. At the entrance of the Dantian, there were a few rows of talismans floating, preventing the black miasma from entering. It was no wonder Little Wimp fainted. If this resentment were to enter the Dantian, if she were to forcefully expel it, the Dantian would definitely shatter, and her cultivation would be completely destroyed. Most likely, Little Wimp's remaining consciousness had been used to stop this black miasma. Zhu Yao no longer hesitated, and immediately guided the black miasma over. However, it was useless. That black miasma seemed to have died on Little Wimp's body, and did not even bother to care about her. The hell, you're filled with resentment, and you're actually valuing men over women? With a thought in her mind, she instantly materialized several thin lightning bolts, and with a series of crackling sounds, they struck together with the fire's spiritual energy, instantly scattering the black miasma. Although she could not remove it, it was still possible to strike it to the point where it could not retaliate. The moment the black miasma scattered, Zhu Yao immediately used her spiritual energy to envelop it and kept it together. Initially, she had wanted to first control this resentment and then slowly deal with it. However, the moment the resentment that she had scattered earlier entered her meridians, it was as though it was injected with adrenaline and began to wander around her body wantonly. It was clearly so quiet on Little Wimp's side, so why was it convulsing the moment it entered her body? Zhu Yao did not manage to control it, and her meridians flowed in the opposite direction, causing her to puke out a mouthful of blood. Pwah! Little martial ant. Zmo was shocked as he hurriedly sprinted over. Zhu Yao gritted her teeth. Taking advantage of the fact that the resentment had yet to swim to her dantian, she used all of the spiritual energy in her body to seal the surroundings of her dantian. As expected, the resentment had already swam to the vicinity of her dantian and was unable to advance even an inch further. Just as Zhu Yao was about to heave a sigh of relief, the black miasma that had finally stopped suddenly turned around and immediately tunneled into her divine sense. The hell? This plot development was clearly not going according to the script, because all of the spiritual energy in her body was protecting her dantian. The black miasma seemed to be able to directly enter her divine sense without any obstructions. Zhu Yao's vision instantly darkened. Mama's egg, I've gone too far. For a moment, Zhu Yao could not sense her own existence, and there was only a thick darkness. Her surroundings were oppressive to the point where she could barely breathe. There seemed to be something in the depths of her heart, as though it was trying to break out. Immediately after, the scene in front of her changed, and she suddenly saw a place with verdant hills and limpid waters. Large patches of fresh flowers bloomed, filling the entire ground. The sky was filled with multicolored light, and auspicious clouds could be seen everywhere. A white-clothed woman stood in the middle of the flowers and slowly turned her head around. Zhu Yao took in a deep breath. That was a shockingly beautiful face. The number of beauties Zhu Yao had seen in the cultivation world were as many as the hairs on a cow, and the humanoid figures of the god race were even more heaven-defying beautiful. However, none of them could compare to this woman. Whatever beauty that could captivate the birds and beasts, eclipse the moon and put flowers to shame, they all seemed crude when used on her. If she really had to use a phrase to describe her, then she could only say that she was too goddamn beautiful to the point of being inhuman. That beauty looked straight at her and suddenly gave a light smile. In an instant, it was as though the flowers on the ground and the multicolored light in the sky had all lost their colors. Why? She suddenly spoke up, as though she was doubtful, yet also as though she was questioning. Why? Why? She asked again and again, and each of her words was deeper than the last. The expression on her face grew more and more desperate, as though a beautiful scene had suddenly faded away. A ghastly crack suddenly appeared on her peerlessly beautiful face. It spanned across her entire face, and there were even traces of blood seeping out from it. Her white clothes were slowly dyed red as well. In a blink of an eye, a beautiful fairy had turned into a demon from hell. Even the hundreds of flowers on the ground were slowly withering, and lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the sky. Zhu Yao trembled from fright. The scene, however, changed, and instantly changed into another scene. Next, she saw the life of a pitiful girl. The transmission method was exactly the same as the story mode in the past. The girl was called Luo, and was said to be a descendant of the ancient god race. However, this girl was a little unlucky. She was abandoned when she was young, and was picked up by a pair of human traffickers. She was often sold here and there. She could not eat her fill, nor could she wear warm clothes. After much difficulty, she finally grew to the age of 10 and encountered a deity sect that wanted to take her in as a disciple. However, because she possessed the worst Pinta spirit veins, when she entered the deity sect, she was arranged to do odd jobs in the outer sect. Though her luck was a little bad, she possessed the bloodline of the god race, and cultivation was completely effortless. Basically, she would be able to learn anything the moment she learned it. And because of this, she attracted the jealousy of her fellow disciples, who knew how many times she suffered in the dark. After much difficulty, she finally built her foundation, and her days became a little better. She was taken in as a disciple by an Azoth practitioner in the inner sect. She also officially entered the center of power in the cultivation world. Because of her spirit veins, in the beginning, everyone did not think highly of her. However, she was diligent in her studies. In a short 10 years, she cultivated to the foundation paragon level. A mere Penta spirit veins holder actually possessed a cultivation speed that was comparable to the heavenly spirit veins. Naturally, it attracted the suspicion of others. There were even people who felt that she possessed a mystical treasure. Even if she did not do anything, she still attracted a huge amount of hatred. The moment she stepped out of the door, someone would occasionally pop out to stab her with a sword or cut her with a blade. And among these hatred, there was even her master who was stuck at the Azoth core stage for 100 years. Initially, this Azoth practitioner did not take her in as a disciple willingly either. However, according to the sect's rules, all Foundation disciples had to enter the inner sect. Ing Luo belonged to the category of one who was forcefully shoved into the inner sect because the number of students she recruited did not meet the requirements. Hence, this Azoth practitioner really did not plan on teaching her anything diligently and simply threw a few manuals to her. In the end, his disciple was enlightened, and her cultivation speed was even faster than his own, and she was about to surpass his own Azoth core. Her master could not take it anymore. Both in the open and in the dark, he pressured this disciple of his. When he heard the rumor that she possessed a mystical treasure, he even colluded with others and wanted to lay his hands on his own disciple, killing her and seizing her treasure. However, this time, the girl's luck exploded. Not only did she manage to avoid this calamity, when she was surrounded and attacked by the crowd, she suddenly gained enlightenment and directly formed her Azoth core. Instead, the people who surrounded and attacked her suffered the consequences of their own actions, as they were all wiped out. In a short 10 years, she managed to advance from Foundation to the Azoth core stage. A talent like this finally attracted the sect's attention. The girl was heavily nurtured by the sect, and she learned together with those geniuses with heavenly spirit veins. Although she had high-grade cultivation manuals and resources, because she did not have any background or backing, she was still the little cabbage that was bullied. It was as if the girl's body was plastered with come and hit me notes, and everyone wanted to go up and bully her. However, the girl did not care about these people's targeting and discrimination. Perhaps it was because no one had ever treated her well since young, so she did not have such thoughts. Instead, she got used to being bullied and bullied. Furthermore, even in this kind of environment, the girl actually did not grow crooked. She was still the little cabbage that was upright, with proper roots and red shoots. While dealing with the evil intentions of her fellow sect members, she worked hard in her cultivation. Until the sect she was in was attacked by heretic practitioners, the mountain barrier formation was broken, and a huge wave of demonic beasts attacked. However, it was such a coincidence that the few nascent soul cultivators and a soul formation supremacy that were in charge of the sect all rushed to a newly emerged mystic realm, and were not in the sect at all. The only people in the sect who could be considered as battle power were the few Azoth core cultivators. Although the girl was young, her sense of justice was bursting. She stubbornly fought the group of heretic practitioners to the end and waited for the sect's management to return and rescue her. However, these heretic practitioners were not to be trifled with. Their methods were extremely vicious, and there were even those evil arts that could refine souls and devour souls. A lot of the disciples became timid, and only the proper and upright girl defended with her life. She even activated the sect's mountain barrier mystic treasure to stop the heretic practitioners. When the management returned, she was already on her last breath. Perhaps it was because her actions were too touching. The sect's sect master personally healed her injuries and took her in as a chamber disciple. He began to teach her diligently. With resources and backing, the girl spent 200 years to cultivate to late-stage Azoth core. Then, an ancient mystic realm appeared, and all the cultivators above Azoth core went to investigate it. The girl was one of them. However, they realized that it was a mustard seed space left behind by an ancient god. In that space, the girl suddenly awakened her bloodline of an ancient god. She directly formed her nascent soul and rushed to nascent soul Paragon, and her identity also surfaced. She was a legitimate descendant of an ancient god and the younger sister of forgotten god Pallas's palace master. Her godly strength had even surpassed that of forgotten god Pallas's palace master. As a descendant of a god, the girl naturally could not stay in her original sect any longer. She was welcomed into Forgotten God Palace and became the mistress of a palace. However, she did not live a blissful life, because the devil had arrived. Zhu Yao deeply felt that the god and devil races were definitely an unbreakable couple, and they were the kind that loved to kill each other. A devil was sealed in the ancient god's firmament space that the girl explored earlier. Taking the opportunity when the crowd entered, it immediately escaped, and it began to spawn a regular storyline of a devil. It was so bored that it went around doing bad things. Its final goal: destroy the world. And the girl Luo, the newly appointed descendant of a true ancient god who had a strong sense of justice, was naturally duty-bound to be sent out by Forgotten God Palace's palace master to save the world. Because she was one of the reasons why the devil was released, the girl fought especially hard. However, a descendant of a god was not equivalent to a god. No matter how hard she worked, how could she defeat the undying and indestructible devil? The cultivation world was defeated. More than 50 nascent soul practitioners and dozens of demigod practitioners were all defeated. In the end, the girl gritted her teeth and used her body as a sacrifice. Using her soul as a guide, she transformed into 5 mystic treasures and once again sealed the devil. The world was saved, but the girl died. Furthermore, her soul was split into pieces, and she was eternally imprisoned in the devil, unable to reincarnate ever again. Zhu Yao sighed. This could completely be considered as a heroic epic that could move one's heart to tears. This girl could truly be considered as a savior. However, the ending was a little too tragic. Zhu Yao could not help but sigh. Suddenly, the scene in front of her changed. The storyline had yet to end, and there was actually a continuation. Zhu Yao continued to watch seriously, and the more she watched, the sadder she felt. That stifling and suffocating feeling from before once again came back, causing an uncontrollable rage to rise within her. The scene displayed was the girl saving the world. 1,000 years later, she woke up, probably because even the heavenly Tao felt that it had mistreated her. After sealing the devil for 1,000 years, the girl's soul slowly separated from those mystic treasures and began to gather. And then, she revived. Though she had lost all of her cultivation, she once again stood in this world alive and well. This was the first time she felt the preciousness of life and felt how much she missed everything in this world. It also made her feel that everything she had done was worth it. However, good people might not necessarily be rewarded. She died. Chapter 244. The reason why heroes were heroes was because they only lived in legends. The girl sacrificed her life to seal the devil, so everyone worshipped her, respected her, and treated her as their savior. Because she was already dead, and the dead could not compete with the living. No matter how high her reputation was, there was no threat. However, if she were to live, this situation would no longer exist. If her reputation was too high, it would definitely affect the other deity sects and pose a threat to the people in their positions. On the surface, the various sects rejoiced over her revival. However, the selfish hearts of the people were faintly suspicious. If she were to live, then wouldn't there be a possibility for the devil to revive as well? The various sects feared the devil. After all, the battle back then had greatly damaged the vitality of a large number of deity sects, and it was impossible for them to recover within 10,000 years. If the devil were to make a comeback, the world would definitely not be able to withstand a single blow. They were worried and afraid. These emotions grew deeper and deeper, and they were filled with fear all day long. They even attributed the reason for this fear to the resurrected girl, Luo. Why did she have to live? Wasn't it great to seal the devil forever? Since she had already chosen death, why did she have to go back on her words and come back to life? As time passed, who would still remember that she had once saved the world? They all wished that she could return to those seals so that they could stop the devil from reviving. Hence, in order to save the world, in order to stop the devil from reviving, the various sects joined hands, and before the girl could even feel her new life, they killed her in the name of justice. Then, they devoured and refined her soul, splitting her soul into 5, and once again placed them on 5 mystic artifacts. When they were completely uncertain if the devil would revive, they killed the former savior of the world. The girl died. She died in the hands of the people she used her life to protect. Even Zhu Yao could feel the towering anger, and the stifling feeling in her heart was unbearable. For the girl, and for those foolish practitioners. She even wanted to rush forward and stop them. However, she could do nothing, and could only watch as the girl was killed. She watched as her soul was forcefully torn apart by the formation, and imprisoned on those 5 mystic artifacts. The scene in front of her changed, and she once again returned to the field of flowers. That hellish girl was still standing in the middle of the flowers, and her entire body was covered in blood red. However, Zhu Yao suddenly no longer felt afraid, because this was how the girl looked before she died. And the bloody scar on her face was the wound where her soul was sliced open. Why? She asked, tears of blood flowing from her eyes. I have never betrayed this world in the slightest, but why does this world treat me like this? Zhu Yao was unable to answer. The blood on the girl's clothes became redder and redder, and she seemed to have fallen into endless despair. Suddenly, the blood turned into streams of black gas that enveloped her whole body like smoke. Resentment. So this was the cause of resentment. Being treated like this by the world. How could she not hate? How could she not resent? Zhu Yao felt as though she was about to be drowned by the enormous sorrow and desolation, causing thoughts of despair to arise in her. It was as though everything in this world had already gone far away, and she felt as though she had fallen into an ice house. Even her heart had frozen, and she was no longer able to transcend. Even death had become an extravagant hope, and the thought of giving up on everything had arisen for no reason. Ding! A clear and crisp sound suddenly rang in his ears. The scene in front of him changed, and suddenly the world was filled with a familiar darkness. A QQ chat window popped up, and a few lines of text appeared on it. Realm Spirit, girl, how are you? Realm Spirit, wake up, girl. Realm Spirit, don't scare me. Come back to your senses. Realm Spirit, young girl. Realm Spirit, Zhu Yao. Realm Spirit, Princess Flattop. Realm Spirit, airport. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched, and instantly, her face darkened. You're the airport, your entire house is an airport. Realm Spirit, yo, brave girl, let's create a miracle together. Create your sister. Zhu Yao habitually retorted. Taking a deep breath, that feeling of despair earlier had already receded like the tide, and could no longer be found. Her emotions earlier were most likely affected by the resentment. She turned to look at her surroundings. Did I die again? Realm Spirit. No, girl. At the very most, you're just having an out-of-body experience. Out-of-body experience? Zhu Yao was startled. Then what about my body? Realm Spirit. Your body has already been controlled by resentment and is currently in a state of deep slumber. You're saying I can still return? That was her original avatar. She had feelings for it. Realm Spirit was silent, and only after a while did he type out a line of words. Realm Spirit. Unless the resentment in your body is cleared. Otherwise, even if you return, you will still be devoured by resentment. Oh. Zhu Yao did not expect that the situation would be so severe. Realm Spirit. Ho ho, young girl, this mission seems to be too difficult. It's my mistake in arranging the work. Why don't we change to a more relaxing bug? Could bugs be separated into relaxed and enjoyable ones? Zhu Yao gave a scornful look. Forget it. Since I've already begun to fix it, then I'll just fix it till the end. Realm Spirit. Eh? He seemed to have paused for a moment. Realm Spirit, young girl, do you still want to continue dealing with resentment? Friend, do you need to top up your IQ? Do you need a dozen? Recharge once every 5 times, and you'll receive the money immediately? Scram. Zhu Yao rolled her eyes at him. I feel that I have most likely found a way to eliminate resentment. Realm Spirit, hey, if you're going to retort, can you not type it out at the same time? Do you think I won't be able to see it just by adding a bracket? Ugh, realm spirit. Don't mind these details. Young girl, are you sure you want to continue with this bug? That's right. Regarding the specific method to eliminate resentment, I'm not sure yet. I need to personally verify it. Zhu Yao solemnly said, and I need your help. Realm spirit. Oh, come, young girl. Don't pity me just because I'm a delicate flower. Use me all you want. Will you die if you don't act stupid? Zhu Yao sighed. Ignoring his shameless words, she analyzed. Usually, in a game, if you want to fix a bug, you will have to patch it on top of the original foundation. However, if you encounter a bug that cannot be fixed, which is a fatal bug, then there's only one way. If you want to save it, then there's only one way, and that's to delete and reprogram it. Back then, when resentment entered my divine sense, I saw the source of resentment. I must say, she indeed has the qualifications to be resentful, and this resentment is basically impossible to eliminate. If you want to solve it, you have to start from the source. That's why I want to go to that world and find that girl. Realm Spirit did not reply, as though he was considering her suggestion. After a long while, the next line of words appeared. Realm Spirit, you want to eliminate her resentment and let go of her obsession towards the world. You can put it that way, Realm Spirit. But although her soul is still in the world, resentment has long left her soul body. In the underworld, it might not be affected by her soul. I have to give it a try. Realm Spirit. All right, I believe you. Go, Pikachu. Pikachu, your sister. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. She suddenly recalled something. Oh right, just what's wrong with my master? Why does he often turn into a child? Is it because he's affected by resentment as well? Realm Spirit, that's not it. Young girl, there's always a price to pay for going against the heavenly Tao. What do you mean? Speak human language. Realm Spirit. He forcefully descended into the lower realm with the power of a higher deity, and then forcefully stayed in the lower realm. Naturally, the heavenly Tao will not tolerate it. You're saying that the reason why he fainted is because he stayed in the lower realm? Zhu Yao's heart tightened, and she was instantly filled with guilt. If not for her, why would her master, Realm Spirit? Ha, young girl. This is all because of love. As expected, men and women in love are all blind. Scram. Zhu Yao glared at him, and her heart was instantly filled with anxiety. Is there any way to solve this problem? No. This daddy wants to return. Realm Spirit, don't be anxious, young girl. How can I not be anxious? That was her man. Realm Spirit, Ku. I'm saying, the problem has already been solved. Zhu Yao was startled. What do you mean? The scene flashed, and suddenly, a video interface appeared. The scene displayed was exactly the scene after she fainted. Her master, who was dressed in white, was currently sitting next to her with a cold expression. Wang Shuji was standing at the side. As though he had just woken up, his expression was not very good. As for Ziamo, Ziamo was currently stuck in the wall. Looking at the angle and depth of where he was stuck, it was definitely her master who filmed him. Zhu Yao, how did my master wake up? Realm Spirit, do you remember the pearl that the river of forgetfulness gave you? That was the purest source of water, the river of forgetfulness, that had yet to come into contact with any soul. It was able to purify all things, so as long as he carried it by his side, the heavenly Tao would recognize his existence, and naturally, he would wake up. As expected, that pearl was for her master to use. Zhu Yao turned to look at her own master, and suddenly, she felt a little uncomfortable. Every single time, he would leave without saying goodbye. She was really mentally tired as well. However, if she did not go, who knew which world Realm Spirit would reincarnate her into? She might as well eliminate her resentment and then return to her original avatar. Can I send him a message? Realm Spirit, young girl, I'm not a postman. No sense of loyalty. Forget it. Send me to the mission. Realm Spirit. All right, young girl. This time, can you give me a more reliable avatar? Don't be as weak as trash, all right? Realm Spirit. No problem, young girl. A proper young girl. Let's go. Realm Spirit. All right, young girl. In order to increase the success rate, I have decided to make some slight adjustments to the details. Good luck, young girl. Wait a minute, what adjustments did you make, hey? The scene flashed, and a familiar loading bar flashed past at light speed. In the next second, Zhu Yao sank into unconsciousness. She instantly had a premonition that she was about to be screwed. When Zhu Yao woke up once again, she was on a stone bed. Her entire body was stiff, as though she had been petrified. After spending a lot of effort, she finally managed to sit up. As she adjusted her body, she inspected her surroundings. This was a stone room, and it was completely sealed. There were quite a few formations that gathered spiritual energy inside, and the spiritual energy was very abundant. She sat for exactly an hour before her meridians were unobstructed, and her stiff body began to slowly relax as well. Taking a deep breath, she wanted to circulate the spiritual energy in her body, only to realize that her dantian was completely empty. The hell, what happened to the promised powerful avatar? She couldn't possibly have to cultivate from the beginning again, right? Wait a minute. It wasn't that simple. She calmed her heart and immediately looked into her body. She realized that although her body did not have any spiritual energy, her divine sense was as vast as the ocean. The hell, this divine sense was clearly at the pace of a demigod. Zhu Yao was instantly excited. So it was just a lack of electricity, and she finally did not have to cultivate from the beginning again. Hence, she immediately guided spiritual energy into her body. In an instant, the spiritual energy guiding formation in the stone room began to circulate wildly, and a large amount of lightning spiritual energy began to pour into her body. Lightning flashed in the surroundings, and as though a violent gale had passed through the room, there would occasionally be lightning crackling sounds, directly striking onto the stone wall. She did not know what material the stone wall was made of, as there wasn't even the slightest trace of it. The spiritual energy gathered by the formation was extremely limited, and in just a few moments, it had already been completely absorbed. It was basically not enough for her to recover her cultivation. However, after the formation stopped, even more spiritual energy was being transmitted up from underground, and it was endless. It seemed like there was still a spiritual vein hidden beneath this stone room. Zhu Yao instantly felt at ease and began to absorb the spiritual energy peacefully. After a full 10 days, her empty dantian finally had enough spiritual aura. Her cultivation had also successfully recovered to the demigod level. Zhu Yao casually cast a dirt removal art on herself, and then she immediately materialized a water mirror to look at her avatar's current appearance. There was no helping it. She simply did not have much confidence in Realm Spirit's character. A woman's face appeared in the water mirror. She looked very stern, and her entire person did not look very beautiful. She could only be considered to be upright. Her height was average, her clothes were average, her looks were average, and her chest was average as well. She looked like a female practitioner that did not have any special characteristics and belonged to the type of face that would not be recognizable even if she was thrown into a crowd. Zhu Yao curled her lips. So be it if she was ordinary. Currently, she no longer had any hopes for this avatar, as long as she did not turn into something strange. She silently prepared herself mentally and accepted this new avatar. With a wave of her hand, she kept the water mirror and recalled the mission this time. Firstly, she had to obtain those 5 mystic treasures, release the miserable girl's remnant soul, and then have a good chat with her about life. Even if she could not eliminate her resentment, at the very least, she could send her to reincarnate. With her current demigod strength, Zhu Yao felt very confident. After carefully inspecting this stone room, she saw a formation on the right wall. It seemed like that was the exit. Zhu Yao did not hesitate and immediately injected a strand of spiritual energy into the formation. With a loud bang, the entire right wall began to slowly open to the 2 sides. Before she could even take a step out, she realized an old man was standing outside the door. He had the cultivation of an early-stage nascent soul practitioner, and he was dressed in a blue robe as well. He even had a long white beard on his face, and he held a horsetail whisk in his hand, giving him a very sage-like appearance. A large group of disciples followed behind him. There were males and females, old and young, and they densely filled up the entire mountain slope at the entrance of the cave. Zhu Yao's heart trembled. What were these people planning to do? Were they going to fight? Seeing her come out, the eyes of the sage-like old man shone. Taking a step forward, with a pa sound, his sage-like appearance was torn apart. He bowed down towards her, and with a loud voice, he said with a powerful aura, "This disciple greets old ancestor." When his words fell, a large group of disciples behind him knelt down, and in an instant, resounding cries resounded throughout the mountain. "We greet old ancestor." Chapter 245. When you had always felt that he was a qualified palace master, and a positive one at that. Even though the forgotten god palace he took over was a terrible mess, he still did not give up, and tried his best to lead the sect towards prosperity. No, towards the path of riches. Unfortunately, dreams were plentiful, but reality was bony. Even though Forgotten God Palace had the high and mighty brand of descendants of the primordial god race, it still could not withstand the weight of time. Originally, Forgotten God Palace, which relied on the addition of godly power, this almost cheat-like attribute, had always stood at the forefront of the cultivation world. However, due to the thinning of their bloodline in recent years, Forgotten God Palace's attribute enhancement had become weaker and weaker. Until now, other than the palace master, who still had a trace of godly power that he himself could not sense, the other direct disciples basically only had the sign of descendants of the primordial god race. In order to retain the godly power, the previous palace masters had unavoidably adopted some xenophobic measures, which resulted in an extremely bad effect. The most direct manifestation was that external talents could not be brought in, and the internal corruption had caused the overall quality of the sect to plummet. Until now, there were not many disciples that could be brought out. When he realized the severity of the problem and began to accept the outstanding disciples from the outside, it was already too late. Putting aside the fact that disciples with good aptitudes were extremely hard to find, even if there were, they would have long been snatched away by the various sections. Especially after the great battle that affected the entire cultivation world, Forgotten God Palace had suffered even more heavy losses. Almost all the cultivators that could hold up the front had fallen in this battle. Out of the dozens of nascent soul cultivators, only 5 remained. Forgotten God Palace's strength once again plummeted, and they could barely lift their heads in front of the various sections. When you was so worried that he could not sleep at night. Yet, the various sects still stabbed a knife into his heart at this crucial moment, and invited their Azoth core disciples to participate in the intersect tournament. Although it was called a friendly competition, when you knew that it was actually a gathering to test the strength of the various sections. This competition immediately revealed a problem. The 10 Azoth core disciples that Forgotten God Palace sent out were beaten like dogs. It was fine if they did not obtain a ranking, but not a single disciple actually entered the top 10. They could not even compare to normal first-rate sections. When you had practically vomited blood when he returned. After this competition, forget about being the leader. Most likely, he would not even be able to keep his position as a first-rate sect, and would completely lose his right to speak. When you even had the thought of dying. Just when he was at his wit's end, at his wit's end, at his wit's end, a miracle had happened. A demigod's spiritual light suddenly descended from the returning heaven forest at the back of the mountain. The entire Forgotten God Palace was enveloped by tribulation clouds, and the rumbling tribulation lightning actually struck for an entire 10 days. Then, a soul formation aura emanated from one of the stone chambers. A soul formation cultivator. There was actually a soul formation supremacy in the sky-returning forest. After that battle, not a single divinity transformation cultivator could be found in the entire cultivation world. But here he was, a living one. When you was so excited that his beard lit up, he gathered outside the stone room and personally welcomed the venerable one out of isolation. With a soul formation cultivator in charge, which sect would dare to bully them? The more when you thought about it, the more beautiful it was. The more he thought about it, the more excited he became. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that the venerable one in the stone room was pleasing to the eye. He came at the right time. You are the most beautiful cloud in the sky. I filled you with wine and made you stay. What's weird? However, when the supremacy walked out of the stone room, he was dumbfounded. Who was this? Her face looked so unfamiliar. The returning heaven forest at the back of the mountain was a place for seclusion in the sect. Those who entered were all practitioners who were at the end of their lifespans and were risking their lives to make a breakthrough. However, the majority of the disciples never returned, and those who came out were all in dire straits. It was an existence that was easily forgotten. However, this was a soul formation supremacy. In other words, she was at least a nascent soul practitioner when she entered. Yet, why had he never seen her before? When you gritted his teeth. Forget it, the sect could not afford to lose this sovereign. Just treat it as a gift from the heavens. Hence, he decided to go all out. With a thud, he knelt down and loudly shouted, "This disciple greets old ancestor." Thus, the beautiful young girl Zhu Yao, who had just gotten a boyfriend not too long ago, was called an ancestor just like that. Old ancestor, I wonder which blessed land your family wishes to have as your cave residence? When you cheerfully welcomed her, his smile was so wide that his eyes could not be seen. Old Zhu Yao, please don't call me ancestor, all right? She still had to get married. You can just call me by my name. You must not. When Yu's expression turned cold, as he said with a stern look, there is an order of seniority. As the palace master of Forgotten God Palace, this disciple should set an example. Old ancestor, please do not reject me. He looked as though she was stepping on his dignity as a junior. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched as she silently endured it. If not for the fact that you're already so old, just randomly choose a place, as long as you can live in it. She did not have any requirements regarding the place she was going to live in. In any case, her goal was those few mystic treasures. When Yu heard this, he did not bring her around blindly anymore, and immediately went to a mountain peak with green mountains and clear waters. She did not know if it was a coincidence, but that was the tallest of all the floating mountains. Beside it was the main mountain, and on the right was a forest. However, a few kilometers away, there was a mountain peak that was completely pitch black in color. There was not a single blade of grass or tree on the mountain, nor was there any spiritual energy surging out. Yet, it was still floating steadily in the air. Zhu Yao was a little curious. What's that? That's the sword-seeking mountain. When Yu explained, suddenly, as though he had thought of something, he said, in a while, it will be the day of the various sects searching for swords. When that time comes, I hope that old ancestor will protect my sect. Sword-seeking? What's that? Zhu Yao casually asked. When Yu was startled for a moment, as he looked at her a little strangely. Sword-seeking is naturally to search for weapons that are compatible with one's body, or materials for forging. Just how long had the old ancestor been in closed-door training for, to not even know about such matters? This sword-seeking mountain rose from the ground several thousand years ago, and there are countless materials for forging mystic treasures inside. However, because this mountain was born on top of my sect's spiritual vein, the weapons forged using the materials here are born with spirituality and will choose their own masters. Before they find a suitable master, even if the weapon is forged, it will still return here and wait for the fated person. Hence, our sect will hold a sword-seeking assembly once every 10 years. It's that amazing? Then wouldn't the other sects be dying from jealousy? After all, they would only come once every 10 years, while they were right at their doorstep. However, when he said that, Zhu Yao began to look forward to it a little. She might be able to use this sword-seeking assembly to understand the whereabouts of those 5 mystic treasures, and then borrow them to use. Even if they weren't willing to lend them to her, she could still snatch them. Zhu Yao stayed on the mountain for 5 days, and inquired about the current situation of this world from the mouths of the disciples who came to serve them. She wouldn't have known if she didn't hear it, but the moment she heard it, her entire being felt terrible. Initially, she had thought that Realm Spirit had given her a character with its own plot, but that was not the case. Not a single person in the sect knew of her at all. However, because the place where she appeared just so happened to be in the stone room at the back of the mountain, that Palace Master naturally classified her as a member of the sect. It was no wonder that Old Man refused to call her name no matter what. It wasn't that he didn't want to call her, but he basically didn't know her. He was also afraid of offending a demigod practitioner, so he could only flatter her like an old ancestor. As expected, those who could become sect masters were all thousand-year-old old foxes. This was evidently a scam for her. After finding out the truth, Zhu Yao immediately went to explain to Wen Yu that she did not wish to stay in this sect. Wen Yu, however, stopped her with a face full of snot and tears. As he cried, he recounted his sorrowful history. From the establishment of the sect, to the sect's glory, and then to the current awkward situation. He hugged onto her thigh with all his might, unwilling to let go. A scene of a white-haired old man who was over 50 years old crying and shouting to stay, begging to be conquered. As a good young lady, she simply could not bear to kick him away. In the end, she still nodded. Wen Yu instantly became spirited. His waist was no longer sore, his legs no longer hurt, and he no longer hugged onto her thigh. His snot and tears flowed freely. I have yet to ask, what is Sovereign's Taoist title? The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. Yu Yao. Changing one's expression was definitely an essential skill for sect masters. So it's Sovereign Yu Yao. The old man respectfully bowed. For Sovereign to face the demigod tribulation in my sect, and to choose to stay in the sect, it can be said that you are fated with my sect. Forgotten God Palace will definitely not forget Sovereign's great kindness. Zhu Yao replied him with 2 words. Ho ho. Forgotten God Palace. If she did not remember wrongly, this should be Girling Luo's main family, the sect where the descendants of the ancient gods were based, right? Wasn't it really amazing in the scenario? Why was it in such a miserable state now? There wasn't even a single demigod sovereign in the sect. As though he saw through her doubts, Old Man Wen Yu took the initiative to explain. Sovereign might not know this, but in that battle a few hundred years ago, our sect lost dozens of nascent soul practitioners, damaging our foundations. That's why we ended up in such a state. A few hundred years ago? Zhu Yao was startled. What kind of great battle could cause the death of so many nascent soul practitioners? Even dozens of nascent soul practitioners couldn't defeat them? When you sighed, how can the devil race be so easy to deal with? Devil race? Zhu Yao widened her eyes. A thought flashed past her mind, as she faintly felt that there was something wrong with her reincarnation this time. Sovereign did not expect that the devil race would still appear in this world, right? When you shook his head with a pained look, if not for the blood sister of the previous palace master, Palace Mistress Ing Luo, who risked her life to seal the devil race, how could this peaceful world still exist? She did not expect that in just a short few hundred years, the various sects had already begun to target our forgotten god palace. Wait a minute. Zhu Yao was a little confused, as she looked at the old man seriously. You're saying that Ing Luo sealed the devil race a few hundred years ago? That's right. When you nodded, lowering his head, he pondered for a moment. I think it's been a few hundred years. It should be around 900 years, right? The hell. She finally knew what was amiss. The girl Ing Luo gave birth to resentment 1,000 years after the devil was sealed. Yet Realm Spirit actually sent her to the time before Ing Luo was revived. Not only did she arrive in the girl's world, she had even passed through time and returned to the past. Old man, then do you know where the girl? No, that palace mistress Ing Luo's body is? Of course it's on the god's sacrificial altar, he said with a matter-of-fact look. Only by sacrificing one's body can the ancient sealing art be released. Where's that place? When you pointed to a place in the south. It's right at the sacred lake behind our forgotten god palace. He turned around, and Zhu Yao's figure was no longer in front of him. There was only a white figure flying towards the south. It seemed like the sovereign was very curious about that savior. It seemed like he wouldn't be leaving for a short period of time. He instantly felt at ease. Zhu Yao headed straight to the place when you pointed at. In front of her was a clear pool of water, and the surroundings were filled with flowing formations. A blue-clothed girl was currently lying on top of the pool. Chains formed from spiritual energy were attached to her body. As expected, it was that girl from the storyline. She had yet to revive. She finally understood what the minute adjustments Realm Spirit was talking about were. He was adjusting the timeline. Back then, she said that she wanted to solve the problem from the source, but she never expected that Realm Spirit would really send her back to the source. The girl had yet to be betrayed by the world. The hell? It seemed like she had to adjust all of her plans. Initially, she had thought that her main mission was to collect those few mystic artifacts, release the girl's soul, and then conduct a psychological counseling session with a low success rate, so that she could let go of her resentment and properly reincarnate. From the looks of it, her main mission had become how to stop the world from betraying her and reverse her tragic life. At that moment, she felt that a huge wave of trouble was approaching. Right now, Zhu Yao had no choice but to stay in Forgotten God Palace. She did not know when Ing Luo would wake up, so she had to save her before the various sects found out. Otherwise, with a weak girl like her who had lost all of her cultivation, she could only be bullied by others. And those 5 mystic artifacts, she had to obtain them as soon as possible as well. Those 5 items were also a part of her misery. The psychological counseling trip to a different world instantly became saving that pitiful weak girl. This sour feeling was simply unbelievable, and the sword-seeking assembly that when you spoke of was about to begin in full swing 5 days later. The practitioners of the various sects had all gathered at Forgotten God Palace. Though Wen Yu was grumbling in his heart about the actions of these sects, on the surface, he still politely welcomed them. However, the number of people who came this time was especially large, and among them, there were many nascent soul reverends who were leading the groups. Rather than saying that they were here to search for swords, it would be more accurate to say that they were here to demonstrate their might. Evidently, they had ulterior motives. Wen Yu was rather composed and did not immediately run up the mountain to seek help from Zhu Yao. Instead, he continued to passionately welcome the disciples of the various sections. Only when all of the reputable deity sects in the cultivation world had all arrived, and the leading practitioners of the various sects had all taken their seats, did he walk back into the palace. The various sects had evidently grown impatient from the wait. A practitioner immediately stopped Wen Yu and immediately stated his intentions. Palace Master 1, Forgotten God Palace has protected Sword-Seeking Mountain for so many years, and it has truly been hard and meritorious. The sword-seeking event that happens once every 10 years is truly troublesome as well. Hence, the various sects have discussed, why don't we let the other deity sects manage this sword-seeking mountain from now on, so as to resolve Palace Master's worries. When you turned to look at him, Sword-Seeking Mountain was something that belonged to Forgotten God Palace in the first place, and it was held once every 10 years. It was only because the mystic artifacts within the mountain had the ability to choose their owners, and were unwilling to bury it, that the various sects were invited to enter. They were clearly here to snatch something, yet they still had to use the excuse of resolving Forgotten God Palace's worries. When you coldly laughed and walked towards the main seat in the palace. However, his eyes suddenly shifted, and he did not sit on the main seat. Instead, with a wave of his hand, he had a disciple at another seat to sit on. Looking at the people present and thinking of a certain person on the mountain, he instantly straightened his back. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.